The moon hung low and full over the dense canopy of the ancient forest, its silver glow filtering through gnarled branches to scatter light upon a narrow, overgrown path. Ilara moved silently, each step careful against the soft earth, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on her slender frame. A restless wind whispered through the leaves, carrying with it a faint melody, almost like voices calling from far away, but she could not be sure. Her throat ached with the absence of sound, a cruel reminder of the curse that had stolen her voice long ago. She had wandered for days, following rumors whispered in taverns and market squares, stalers of a hidden place that appeared only when the moon was at its fullest. The Crystal Bazaar, they called it, a market unlike any other, where relics touched by magic beyond mortal comprehension changed hands in bargains that defied common sense and morality. It was said that here, desperate souls might find what they sought, but always at a price. Ilara's fingers instinctively brushed against the worn leather strap of the satchel slung across her shoulder, where a few meager belongings and the faint glimmer of a protective charm nestled. Her eyes, sharp and searching, scanned the shadows as she pressed forward. The forest suddenly opened into a clearing bathed in ethereal moonlight, and there, shimmering as if woven from the very essence of starlight, stood the Crystal Bazaar. Stalls and tents of translucent glass and crystal rose like delicate sculptures, their surfaces catching and fracturing the moonlight into a spectrum of colors that danced on the faces of the few shadowed figures moving within. The air was heavy with the scent of ancient parchment, exotic spices, and something else, something metallic and charged with power. It was a place that seemed alive, pulsating with magic and secrets. Ilara hesitated at the edge of the clearing, the weight of her silence pressing like a stone in her chest. She had no voice to call out with, no words to bargain, no sound to break the heavy quiet that followed her. Yet here, in this place of shifting bargains and forbidden commerce, she dared to hope. As she stepped forward, the bazaar seemed to ripple and shift, corridors forming and dissolving like smoke. The soft murmur of voices, whispers and murmurs too low to catch, wove through the air, as if the market itself was alive and watching. Ilara's gaze fell upon the relics displayed, a shimmering dagger that seemed to drink light, a vial of swirling silver mist, an ornate mirror that reflected not her face but a shadowed past. Suddenly, from the shadows near a stall lined with trinkets and baubles, a figure emerged, cloaked in deep indigo robes embroidered with silver runes that seemed to shimmer with their own light. The merchant moved with a grace that was both unsettling and magnetic. His face was partially hidden beneath a hood, but his eyes caught the moonlight black and glossy like polished onyx, piercing and unreadable. Ilara froze, her breath catching in the silence where no sound could form. The merchant's gaze held hers, and then, wordlessly, he produced a small object from beneath his cloak. It was wrapped carefully in velveted, delicate artifact that pulsed faintly with a light all its own. Without a word, he extended it toward her. The traveler's heart hammered in her chest. She reached out a trembling hand, fingers brushing the soft fabric before curling around the artifact. The moment their skin met, a subtle pulse of energy surged through her, a reminder that this was no ordinary trade. She could feel the weight of countless bargains before hers, the echoes of promises made and broken. The merchant's eyes glinted with something unknowable, and though no words passed between them, Ilara understood the unspoken terms. To reclaim what was lost, she must surrender something precious, something beyond mere currency. The price of silence was about to be rewritten. With a final glance at the luminous stalls that flickered and shifted like living things around her, Ilara tucked the artifact safely into her satchel. The crystal bazaar had marked her, and the night was only beginning. As she turned to leave, the murmurs of the bazaar seemed to swell around her, a chorus of voices both tempting and warning. The moonlight bathed the clearing once more, and Elara's steps quickened, driven by a desperate hope that the bargain she had made would yield her voice again or else bind her forever in silence. The night stretched on, heavy with secrets and shifting shadows, and beneath the endless sky, the traveler vanished into the darkness, carrying with her the fragile promise of a whispered redemption. The crystal shards of moonlight scattered across the midnight sky as Elara stepped cautiously through the winding paths of the crystal bazaar. Her breath was shallow, fingers curling tightly around the worn strap of her satchel. Every step echoed softly on the cobblestones, but the silence that had settled within her was cavernous. She reached the merchant's stall, a place bathed in an ethereal glow, where the air shimmered as if alive with secrets. The merchant was there, his robes a deep ocean of blue, the fabric seeming to drink in the moonlight. His face was mostly hidden beneath the hood, but his eyes gleamed with unsettling knowledge. He extended a slender hand, revealing a small artifact that pulsed with a soft radiance, a swirling core of silver and azure light trapped inside a delicate crystal orb. Elara's heart hammered, a desperate hope flickering within her chest. She needed this. She needed it more than words could say, though words were now a luxury she could no longer afford. The merchant's voice was as smooth as silk, a whisper that slipped into the shadows between them. "This is what you seek, but every gift here demands a price." Her fingers brushed the orb, cool and alive. She nodded, the unspoken agreement vibrating in the air. The merchant's hand moved in a slow, deliberate arc, and a cold tendril of magic wrapped around Elara's throat. She felt the last echo of her voice slip away, swallowed by the night. Panic prickled at her skin as she opened her mouth, but no sound emerged, only a hollow silence that pressed upon her like a weight. She staggered back, clutching at her throat, eyes wide and frantic. The merchant watched, unblinking, a faint smile playing at his lips. "The voice is gone, but the power is yours. Use it wisely." Elara's hands trembled as she grasped the orb tighter. The bazaar around her seemed to pulse and shift, stalls flickering at the edges of her vision. She tried to speak, to plead or curse, but the silence remained absolute. A cold dread settled in her bones, yet beneath it, a stubborn spark of determination flared. She moved deeper into the bazaar's labyrinthian corridors, her footsteps cautious among the twisting stalls. Shadowed figures passed by, their faces etched with weariness and secrets, their own bargains evident in the weight they bore. Some whispered to each other in hushed tones. Others traded glances filled with regret or resolve. Elara watched, learning. Her mind raced to find ways to communicate without sound gestures. Writing in the dirt with a stick, desperate scribbles on scraps of parchment she found abandoned. Each encounter was a test, a reminder of what she had lost and what she must regain. The artifact pulsed faintly in her palm, a beacon of power and mystery. She sensed it held answers, keys to reclaiming her voice, but also the potential to unleash dangers she could barely comprehend. The weight of her sacrifice settled fully upon her as the bazaar's magic swirled around her, unpredictable and mercurial. Her journey through the shifting market was fraught with moments of isolation and fleeting connections. She met other travelers bound by silent bargains, their stories etched in the lines of their faces and the glint of their eyes. Each had paid a price, a fragment of themselves left behind in exchange for something coveted. At one stall, a vendor dealing in enchanted scrolls offered her a knowing look, his lips moving in words she could not hear but understood nonetheless. Alara nodded, a silent pact of understanding passing between them. The bazaar was alive with bargains and debts, a place where desires were bartered in currency far beyond gold. As the night deepened, the market's magic intensified, the air thick with possibility and peril. Ilara's resolve hardened. She would reclaim what she had lost: her voice, her freedom, but first, she had to master the silence that now defined her. The path ahead was uncertain, the stakes higher than she had imagined, yet beneath the weight of her sacrifice, a fierce hope burned. The crystal bazaar might have claimed her voice, but it had not yet claimed her spirit. And so, with the artifact glowing softly in her grasp, Alara stepped forward into the unknown, the silence around her echoing with the promise of both danger and redemption. The night was far from over, and the price of silence was only just beginning to reveal itself. The moon hung low and full over the shifting spires of the crystal bazaar, its silvery light weaving through the labyrinthine stalls that shimmered like mirages. Ilara moved silently, her footsteps muffled by the soft cobblestones, the weight of her voicelessness pressing upon her like an invisible shroud. Each breath she took came with a taste of magic and mystery, the air thick with whispers and unspoken bargains. She clutched the shimmering artifact close to her chest, delicate, peace that seemed to pulse faintly with its own heartbeat. Though she had traded her voice to claim it, the cost of that bargain gnawed at the edges of her mind. What was this relic? What power did it truly hold? And most urgently, how might she reclaim the voice that had been stolen from her? The bazaar, alive and mercurial, shifted around her. Stalls appeared and vanished, and the pathways twisted as if guided by some unseen hand. Alara's heart beat faster, but she forced herself to steady her steps. She was not alone in this twilight market. She had heard whispers of others who had bargained with the merchants here, souls who had lost more than words. Through a haze of mist and light, Alara spotted a figure leaning against a stall draped in velvet and glimmering jewels. The man was tall and slender, his silver hair catching the moonlight, his pale eyes reflective pools of memory and pain. There was something familiar in his wary gaze, something that spoke of shared loss. Alara approached cautiously, her eyes searching his face for any sign of kindness or threat. The man regarded her silently, then raised a hand, fingers moving in a slow, deliberate pattern. Though she could not speak, Alara understood the gesture a greeting. He introduced himself as Marek, a traveler like her, bound by the bazaar's cruel bargains. Through a series of gestures and written symbols he carried, Marek revealed that he had lost not just his voice, but his memories, his sense of time fractured by the market's magic. The price of his desire had been steep, and the consequences had rippled through his very being. Together, they shared their stories in silence, weaving a tapestry of pain and hope. Marek's tale was a warning as much as it was a comfort. The bazaar was not merely a place of commerce, it was a crucible where desires were forged and broken. To reclaim what was lost required more than yearning, it demanded cunning, courage, and the willingness to face the darkness within. Alara listened intently, her fingers tracing the glimmering surface of the artifact. She realized the relic was more than a simple trinket. It held a spirit bound by ancient magic, a force that could either restore her voice or consume her entirely. As they moved through corridors that flickered and bent like liquid glass, Marek showed her sign symbols etched in light, pathways marked by whispered warnings. The bazaar's illusions pressed close, testing their resolve, but Elaros' determination only deepened. Near a stall that seemed to breathe with life, Alara caught a fleeting glimpse of her own reflection, fragmented and fractured, a mirror of her fractured self. Marek reached out, his expression solemn. "The bazaar does not give freely," he signed. "It takes, and it waits." The night deepened, and the market's magic pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to echo Ilara's own heartbeat. She knew she was closer to the truth, but the path ahead was fraught with peril. As the first pale light of dawn began to seep into the edges of the sky, Ilara and Marek parted ways, each carrying the weight of their silent oaths. The bazaar would soon vanish with the sun, leaving behind only memories and the faintest shimmer of dreams. Yet Ilara's resolve burned brighter than ever. She would reclaim her voice, no matter the cost. But to do so, she would need to outwit the shifting shadows of the crystal Bazaar, confront the echoes of the lost that haunted its halls. With a final glance at the fading market, Ilara pressed the artifact to her chest, feeling its pulse synchronize with her own. The journey ahead was uncertain, but she was no longer alone. The silent pact with Marek had given her something precious: hope. And in the realm where bargains were forbidden and magic was a double-edged blade, hope was the most dangerous currency of all. The hours ahead would test her in ways she could not yet imagine, but Ilara was ready. The Crystal Bazaar had whispered its secrets, and she was listening. A new chapter of her story was beginning, one written not with words, but with courage, wit, and the fierce determination to reclaim what was rightfully hers. The night was far from over, and the echoes of the lost still called her name. Moonlight filtered through the swaying fabric of the Crystal Bazaar's ever-shifting corridors, casting long, wavering shadows that danced across the cobblestone paths. Ilara moved cautiously, her senses alert to the mercurial nature of the market around her. Stalls appeared out of nowhere, adorned with wares that shimmered with enchantment, only to dissolve moments later into the misty night air. Ahead, a narrow alleyway opened into a small enclave bathed in a faint, ethereal glow. Hanging from the ceiling were dozens of mirrors, each framed with intricate silver filigree that caught the moonlight and fractured it into prismatic shards. The reflections within the glass were not still. They flickered and shifted, revealing fleeting images of faces both beautiful and terrifying, of landscapes impossible and familiar. Ilara's breath hitched as she stepped closer, drawn by an inexplicable pull. From the shadows emerged a figure, tall and slender, robed in deep indigo that seemed to absorb the light around it. The person's face was hidden behind a smooth, white mask, its expressionless surface gleaming softly. A voice, low and velvety, echoed through the stall. "Welcome, seeker. Here lies the truth you dare not speak aloud." Ilara's eyes narrowed as she tried to speak, but silence remained her only answer. She gestured toward the mirrors, her gaze steady despite the lingering weight of her voiceless curse. The masked trader extended a slender hand toward a mirror at the center of the stall. The glass pulsed with a cold blue light, as if alive, breathing in rhythm with the beating of Ilara's heart. "This mirror shows what you most fear and desire, intertwined. Will you look?" Her fingers trembled as she reached out, fingertips grazing the surface. The glass rippled beneath her touch, and then her reflection emerged, a woman silent yet screaming, a traveler lost in shadows yet burning with fierce determination. The image fractured and reassembled, showing visions of a voice stolen and a freedom sought. As Ilara stared, memories and emotions surged, regrets of past bargains, the loneliness of silence, the aching hope for restoration. The mirror did not lie. It revealed the sacrifices etched into her soul. She saw herself giving more than her voice, risking the very essence of who she was. The trader's voice whispered beside her ear, "Every bargain has a price, every reflection a truth. What are you willing to lose to reclaim what was taken?" A sudden gust swept through the stall, and the mirrors began to shimmer and dissolve, the images fading like smoke. Alara stepped back as the enclave blurred and melded into the surrounding market, the ephemeral nature of the bazaar reminding her that nothing here was fixed or certain. Yet within her, a new resolve kindled. The mirror had shown her the stakes, and though fear lingered, determination burned brighter. The night stretched onward, and the shifting bargains of the crystal bazaar awaited. Her silence was no longer a shackle, but a challenger promise she intended to keep. The moon hung high as Alara moved forward, the echoes of the mirror's truths echoing in her mind. Somewhere deeper in the bazaar, her voice waited to be reclaimed, but the path was fraught with illusions, masks, and mercurial magic. And so, beneath the silver gaze of midnight, her journey continued. The air within the secluded alcove was thick with the scent of ancient dust and faint traces of jasmine, a stark contrast to the bustling labyrinth of the crystal bazaar outside. Alara stepped cautiously forward, her footsteps muffled against the worn stone floor. Before her stretched an enormous tapestry, suspended from the vaulted ceiling like a living relic of the market itself. The fabric shimmered subtly in the moonlight, threads of silver and gold weaving intricate patterns that pulsed faintly, as if breathing with a life of their own. Her eyes widened in awe. The tapestry depicted countless scenes, each a frozen moment from the myriad bargains struck in the bazaar's shadowed depths. Figures emerged from the woven threads, some joyous, clutching newfound treasures, others desolate, shackled by unseen bonds. The tapestry was not merely cloth, but a living archive, a record of fates entwined in the forbidden commerce that defined the market. A soft rustle interrupted her reverie. Turning, Alara saw a figure emerge from the shadows, the weaver, draped in garments that seemed spun from moonlight and shadow. The ageless being moved with a grace that belied any mortal tether. Their eyes, reflecting the flicker of countless stories, met Alara's with a knowing calm. "Welcome, seeker." The weaver's voice was a whisper carried on the breeze. "Here lies the story of those who dared to trade their souls within the bazaar. Each thread is a life, each not a choice." Alara swallowed hard, stepping closer. "And my thread," the weaver extended a slender finger, pointing to a cluster of glowing threads near the center of the tapestry. Alara's gaze followed, tracing the luminous strands that pulsed with a gentle, rhythmic light, her own bargain woven into the fabric of countless others. As she studied the intricate patterns, the tapestry shifted. Scenes began to animate, a young man relinquishing his shadow in exchange for knowledge, a woman trading her memories for eternal youth, another losing her laughter to obtain power. Each vignette was a story of sacrifice and consequence, of desire tempered by loss. The weaver spoke softly. "The thread you hold is knotted tightly with the artifact you now bear. It is not merely a trinket, but a vessel of will, bound to your fate and the market's mercurial nature. To wield it is to accept the bazaar's terms, never forgiving." Ilara's fingers trembled as she reached out to touch the tapestry's surface. The threads warmed beneath her skin, the patterns pulsing in response to her touch. Suddenly, the threads coalesced, revealing a complex natter weave of silver and shadow that bound her fate inexorably to the relic. The artifact in her satchel seemed to pulse in echo, its magic resonating with the tapestry's rhythm. A wave of realization washed over her. This was no mere coincidence. The bazaar had chosen her, her voice lost and her destiny entwined with forces far greater than she had imagined. The tapestry was a map not of places, but of possibilities, of paths taken and those yet to be forged. "What must I do?" Alara asked, her voice barely a whisper, aching to break free. The weaver's gaze softened. "Understand the cost, embrace the challenge, and weave your own fate with care." The threads of the past will guide you, but only your will can alter the pattern. Alara nodded, a fierce determination igniting within her. The tapestry's glow dimmed as the weaver stepped back into shadow, leaving her alone with the weight of destiny and the pulsing artifact at her side. She turned from the alcove, the scenes of the tapestry etched into her mind. Every step she took felt heavier, burdened with knowledge, yet buoyed by newfound purpose. The Crystal Bazaar was no longer just a market of forbidden bargains. It was the loom upon which her fate was woven, and she would unravel its secrets, thread by delicate thread, until she reclaimed the voice stolen from her and shaped a future she could call her own. Outside, the moonlight glittered across the shifting stalls, the market alive with whispers and promises. Alara's journey was far from over. It had only just begun. With the tapestry's lessons etched in her heart, she stepped forward into the night, ready to face the mercurial tides of the bazaar and the destiny entwined within her grasp. The tapestry scene left Alara with a haunting clarity. Each thread she saw was a life forever altered by choices made in desperation or hope. The realization that her own fate was not isolated but interwoven with countless others brought a profound sense of both connection and solitude. The weaver's cryptic guidance echoed in her mind as she navigated the labyrinthine corridors once more, the tapestry's patterns replaying behind her eyelids. Every store she passed seemed to shimmer with new meaning. Every merchant's gaze held secrets layered with the weight of unspoken bargains. The threads of the past were alive in the present, and the relic she carried was a key part blessing, part cursed, to unlocking the mysteries that bound her voice to silence. Determined, Alara clutched the artifact tightly. The night stretched before her, a canvas of shifting shadows and hidden truths. The threads of fate had been revealed, but how she would weave her own story remained to be seen. With a final glance toward the fading tapestry's alcove, she stepped deeper into the Crystal Bazaar's embrace, ready to face whatever bargains awaited her in the moonlit maze. The hidden alleys of the Crystal Bazaar were alive with a restless energy that night, a pulsating heartbeat beneath the waning moon. Alara moved cautiously, her footsteps muffled against the polished stone floor that shimmered with a faint iridescence. Every stall seemed to flicker in and out of existence, the magic sustaining them trembling like a candle in a gust of wind. She pulled her tattered cloak tighter, feeling the weight of silence around her, not just the silence of her lost voice, but the heavy, suffocating hush that wrapped itself around the market as dawn crept closer. The artifact she clutched in her palm pulsed softly, an inner light that throbbed in time with her racing heart. Its secrets teased her, whispering promises she could almost grasp but never fully hold. She knew time was running out. The bazaar was a creature of the night, and with the moon's slow retreat, its magic was beginning to unravel. A sudden shift in the shadows caught her attention. From the dark folds of a nearby alley, a figure stepped forward, draped in a cloak so dark it seemed to swallow the faint moonlight. The figure's face was obscured, but their voice was unmistakably a low, echoing whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Ilara," the voice breathed, sending a chill down her spine. "You tread on dangerous ground, weaving threads of forbidden magic. The price is far greater than you imagine." Alara's eyes narrowed, searching the shadowed face for clues, but the figure remained indistinct, a shifting silhouette blending with the night. She wanted to speak, to demand answers, but the silence that had bound her for so long held firm. The shadowed whisper continued. "The bargains made here are not mere trades. They are chains binding soul to market. Your artifact is a key, yes, but also a lock. Beware what you release. Before Alara could react, the figure melted back into the darkness, leaving her alone with the fading glow of the artifact. A tremor of fear mingled with determination surged through her. She was closer than ever to reclaiming her voice. But the warnings were clear. This path was fraught with peril, and the cost might be more than she was willing to pay. As she pressed onward, the bazaar itself seemed to shift beneath her feet. The narrow corridors she had memorized twisted unpredictably, stalls disappearing and reappearing like phantoms. The murmurs of other patrons swirled around her, some bargaining in hushed tones, others fleeing shadows only they could see. At a crossroads, she found Lyral waiting, her green eyes sharp and alert. Though their alliance was uneasy, forged from mutual necessity rather than trust, Alara welcomed the company. Together, they navigated the labyrinthine market, exchanging silent gestures and urgent looks. The weight of unspoken words pressed heavily between them, both understanding that the ticking clock was a threat none could ignore. Lyral motioned toward a stall bathed in a cold blue light. Mirrors lined its walls, each reflecting not the physical form but the fears and desires of those who gazed upon them. Illyra's gaze met her own reflection, silent, voiceless, burdened by the curse she had yet to break. The image flickered, warping into visions of consequences yet to come. The bazaar tests us all, Lyral's eyes seemed to say. We must be cunning, or we will be consumed. Alara nodded, gripping the artifact tighter. The magic within her hand pulsed more urgently now, as if sensing the waning night and the approaching dawn. Around them, the crystalline structures that gave the bazaar its ethereal beauty began to crack and shimmer, strands of magic unraveling in the chill air. Every step brought new dangers, shadowy figures lurking just beyond sight. Whispers of deals gone wrong, and the ever-present risk of losing more than what she had already sacrificed. The lines between friend and foe blurred, alliances shifting like the market itself. A sudden clatter echoed as a nearby stall collapsed into a cascade of sparkling shards. Patrons scattered, their faces masks of panic and desperation. Ilara's heart pounded as she realized the market was fracturing, the spell holding it together weakening with each passing moment. We must hurry, Lyral urged, her voice silent but her expression clear. Before the bazaar fades, and with it, our chance. Ilara nodded, determination blazing in her eyes. The shadows around them twisted, whispering promises and threats alike. She could feel the weight of the forbidden magic pressing against her soul, urging caution but demanding courage. As the first hints of dawn tinged the horizon, the crystal bazaar shimmered one last time, a breathtaking, fragile beauty hanging between night and day. Ilara knew this was her moment. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with peril and mystery, but she would not turn back. With the artifact pulsing in her palm and the shadowed warnings echoing in her mind, Ilara stepped forward into the shifting shadows, ready to confront whatever the fading magic would reveal. And as the moonlight slipped away, the silent promise of the night hung heavy in the air. The cost of reclaiming what was lost would be greater than she had ever imagined. The crystal bazaar pulsed with a restless energy, the flickering lanterns casting dancing shadows across the winding alleyways that twisted like serpents beneath the moonlit sky. Ilara's bare feet brushed against the cobblestones, slick with a faint, silvery dew, her heart pounding louder than the distant tolling of a forgotten bell. The weight of the artifact nestled close against her chest was a constant reminder of the price she had paid her, price that now demanded answers. She moved with purpose through the crowded stalls, past merchants hawking wares that shimmered with enchantments and curses alike. The air was thick with the scent of exotic spices, ancient parchments, and something darker, something unspoken but ever present. Her eyes, sharp and searching, sought the figure who had first tempted her with the promise of lost things restored. At last, she found him, the merchant who had woven words like silk and concealed truths beneath a hood of midnight blue. He stood in a shadowed alcove, the faint glow of a single lantern illuminating the sharp angles of his face and the silver embroidery that traced constellations on his robes. His eyes met hers with an unsettling calm, a knowing spark flickering within their depths. Alara stopped a mere breath away, the silence between them heavy with unasked questions. She tried to speak, but the curse still held her voice captive. Frustration burned in her chest, yet she forced herself to remain steady. Instead, she raised a hand, fingers trembling slightly, and traced a slow arc through the air, a silent plea for truth. The merchant's lips curled into a faint smile. "So, you seek answers," he said softly, his voice a whisper like the rustle of silk. "But answers come at a cost, and the Crystal Bazaar does not deal in simple truths." With a fluid motion, he gestured to the table beside him. Surface carved from dark wood, inlaid with shifting silver patterns that gleamed like liquid moonlight. Upon it lay an ornate board, intricate and alive, its surface shimmering with countless moving pieces. Each was a miniature relic, a symbol, or a figure that seemed to pulse with an inner light. Ilara stepped closer, eyes widening as the pieces rearranged themselves in a slow, hypnotic dance. She saw reflections of herself, fractured and multiplied, some triumphant, others broken. It was a game, the merchant explained, but one with stakes far beyond mere victory or defeat. "Every bargain made here," he murmured, "is a move on this board. Each choice, each trade, is a thread woven into the tapestry of fate. You are not merely a player, you are a piece, and the game is far older and more complex than you realize." Ilara's gaze hardened. The weight of her sacrifice, the silence she bore, suddenly seemed a fragment of something far larger and darker. She gestured emphatically, her eyes pleading for a way to reclaim her voice without surrendering her soul. The merchant regarded her with an inscrutable expression. "To take back what you have lost, you must understand the rules that are never written, only lived. The bazaar tests your cunning, your courage, and your willingness to pay the true price." He extended a slender finger toward the board, where a small, luminous piece pulsed with an eerie glow. "This artifact you carry is but one key. There are others, hidden and intertwined, each bound by bargains forged in desperation and desire." Alara's mind raced. The path ahead was no longer just a quest for a stolen voice, but a labyrinth of shifting alliances and perilous choices. She would need to outwit the bazaar itself, to play the merchant's game on his terms, and find a way to turn the tides in her favor. The merchant's smile deepened, shadows flickering across his face as he leaned forward. "Are you prepared to wager more than you ever imagined? To gamble not just with your voice, but with your very essence?" The question hung between them like a blade's edge. Alara's silence spoke volumes, her resolve forged anew in the crucible of the bazaar's merciless magic. Outside, the market shifted again, stalls vanishing and reappearing as if breathing. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolled midnight once more, marking the hour when bargains are struck and fates rewritten. Ilara took a deep breath, steadying herself for the game to come. The merchant's eyes glittered like stars caught in a storm, but behind them lurked secrets she was determined to unravel. Tonight, the Crystal Bazaar was no longer just a place of forbidden commerce, it was a battleground where the price of silence would be paid in full. As the first tendrils of dawn threatened the shadowed sky, Ilara's gaze never wavered. The game had begun, and she would not be the one to lose. The moon hung low and heavy over the crystal bazaar, its silver light filtering through the translucent veils that draped the shifting stalls. Alara moved cautiously, her steps muffled by the soft ground beneath, each breath a silent prayer she could no longer voice. The weight of her voicelessness pressed down on her more fiercely than the exhaustion etched into her limbs. Grasping the crystalline orb artifact that had cost her her voice, she felt it pulse faintly, as if alive with a heartbeat not her own. Around her, the bazaar hummed with the murmurs of unseen deals and whispered secrets, but for Alara, the silence was absolute and suffocating. She spotted Kethril ahead, his silhouette outlined by the flickering lanterns hanging from crooked poles. She hurried toward him, desperate to communicate, but her attempts were met only with strained gestures and puzzled looks. Her hands shook as she traced frantic symbols in the air, but the magic binding her voice seemed to tighten, responding almost to her will with invisible chains wrapping around her wrists and ankles. Kethril's eyes widened as he noticed the faint shimmer of enchanted chains, their delicate links woven from threads of silence itself. "Ilara," he whispered cautiously, leaning close despite the risk. "Those bonds are more than mere magic, they are a curse tied to the artifact you carry. Breaking them is no simple feat." Her heart thundered in her chest. The realization that the artifact was not just a tool, but an anchor to her silence, filled her with a mixture of dread and determination. She squeezed the orb, feeling a surge of energy ripple through her veins. The chains responded, tightening momentarily before slackening, as if testing her resolve. As the night deepened, the bazaar's shadows lengthened and twisted, and from one of the darker stalls, a figure emerged. The shadowy merchant who had first sold her the artifact stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with an inscrutable light. His voice was but a breath, a whisper that seemed to echo inside Alara's mind. "Breaking the silence chains," he warned, "will come with a price far greater than losing your voice. There are forces bound within that artifact, ancient and restless. Unleashing them could unravel more than just your curse." Alara met his gaze steadily, the silent fire in her eyes speaking volumes. "I have little choice," she signed urgently, her fingers trembling. "To reclaim what was taken, I must break these bonds, no matter the cost." Kethril nodded slowly, his expression torn between hope and fear. "Then we must prepare, for the chains are not merely physical. They are woven of forgotten magic, and the path to freedom will test every part of your being." Together, they sought a quiet alcove deep within the bazaar, where the flickering light barely touched the walls lined with relics and forbidden tomes. Alara sat, the chains shimmering faintly as they wrapped around her, cold and unyielding, yet somehow fragile, like glass threads spun from silence itself. As she concentrated, the artifact pulsed brighter, filling the space with a soft blue glow that danced like ethereal flames. The air thickened with tension. The silence around her grew oppressive, pressing into her skin, her bones, her very soul. She could sense the artifact's spirit stirring within, restless and eager to be freed. Memories flickered behind her closed eyes, echoes of a time before the curse, before the voiceless nights. Faces she once knew, voices she longed to hear again, and the heavy price paid in shadows and silence. She knew the chains were not just barriers but guardians, keeping something dangerous locked away. The weight of the choice settled on her shoulders. To break the silence and risk awakening forces she could neither predict nor control, or to remain bound, a prisoner of her own bargain. Her fingers brushed the orb again, steadying her trembling hands. Outside, the bazaar shifted and shimmered, its magic a living, breathing entity that watched and waited. Somewhere in the distance, The faint sounds of footsteps and whispered deals carried on, oblivious to the quiet storm building within Ilara. With a final breath she could not voice, Ilara steeled herself. The chains glimmered like strands of moonlight, fragile yet unbreakable. And as the first tendrils of dawn threatened the night's dominion, she prepared to shatter her silence, no matter what darkness it might unleash. The bazaar seemed to hold its breath, and in that suspended moment, Ilara's journey took a decisive turn, one that would test the limits of her courage, the strength of her heart, and the very nature of the bargains that bound her. The night was far from over, and the true price of freedom was yet to be revealed. The crystal bazaar thrummed with a darker energy as Ilara moved deeper into its shadowed corridors. The soft glow of enchanted lanterns cast long, wavering shadows against the crystalline stalls. But tonight, the usual allure of magical wonders was tainted by an undercurrent of desperation and fear. Ilara's footsteps were muffled against the smooth stone, but the tension in the air was palpably. Whispered bargain seemed to carry a weight heavier than mere gold or silver. In a narrow alcove, veiled by a curtain of shimmering beads, Ilara found herself face to face with a figure who exuded an unsettling calmness. The crimson merchant stood draped in flowing robes, dyed a deep, blood-red hue, embroidered with intricate arcane symbols that pulsed faintly with power. His pale face was marked by an eerie serenity, his sharp eyes gleaming as he regarded her with an unsettling smile. "You seek to reclaim what was lost," the merchant intoned, voice smooth as silk, yet edged with something colder. "I can offer you a shortcut, a means to retrieve your voice swiftly, but such gifts are not without price." Ilara's heart thudded painfully in her chest, the memory of her voicelessness a raw ache. She nodded cautiously, her eyes locked on the glowing vial the merchant produced from beneath his robes. It shimmered with a liquid light, promising power and restoration. "What is the cost?" she asked silently, frustration and hope mingling in her gaze. "A life, or rather a freedom," the merchant replied, his smile widening. "Another patron's bond, severed for your gain." The words hung heavy between them. Ilara's breath caught as a rush of images swept through her mind. The faces she'd glimpsed in the bazaar, haunted and broken by their own bargains. Could she take from another to save herself? Before she could respond, a sudden commotion drew her attention to a nearby stall. There, a gaunt man with pale scarred skin and trembling hands was speaking urgently to a small crowd. Ilara edged closer, recognizing the desperation etched into his features. "I was foolish," the man said hoarsely, voice rough with emotion. "I made a bargain here, paid with my blood and my daughter's laughter. The price was more than I could bear." He was Morin, a patron who had once sought the bazaar's power and lost more than he had bargained for. Ilara listened as his tale unfolded, how a deal sealed in desperation had cost him his family's freedom, leaving scars that no magic could heal. The sorrow in Marine's eyes was a mirror to the darker possibilities of the bazaar's bargains. Ilara felt a pang of empathy, her resolve hardening. She could not become the instrument of another's suffering, not even for her own salvation. As she stepped away from the crowd, a gentle hand touched her arm. Turning, she met the worried gaze of Lyra, a fellow traveler who had often shared cautious words and quiet companionship. Lyra's eyes, lined with concern, urged patience. "There are other ways," Lyra whispered, her voice steady despite the bazaar's ominous presence. "This place feeds on desperation. If you give in to the darkest offers, you lose more than your voice." Ilara nodded, drawing strength from the fragile alliance. Together, they moved deeper into the bazaar's labyrinth, where whispered warnings mingled with the distant clinking of chainsa, reminder of the stakes at hand. Eventually, Elara found herself standing beneath a shimmering archway, its facets reflecting myriad versions of herself, each fractured and distorted by fear, regret, or ambition. The weight of choice pressed down like a physical burden. To take the shortcut would be to bind another in silence and shadow. To refuse meant prolonging her own suffering, but possibly preserving the fragile humanity within the Bazaar's grasp. Her hand closed tightly around the artifact she had traded her voice for, its pulse a steady beat in the chill night air. With a conflicted resolve, Elara stepped forward, her path uncertain but her conscience clear. The Bazaar's voices echoed, a chorus of bargains made and broken, as the night deepened around her. This choice would shape the rest of her journey, testing her courage and compassion against the merciless tides of forbidden commerce. And as the crystal bazaar shifted once more, Elara knew that every bargain came with a price sometimes paid in blood. The night was far from over, and the true cost of her quest had only just begun to reveal itself. The pale glow of the crystal bazaars, myriad lanterns, cast kaleidoscopic patterns on the ground as Elara settled herself within the quiet confines of a forsaken stall. The air was thick with lingering magic, a hum that seemed to reverberate through the very stones beneath her. In her hands, the shimmering artifact pulsed faintly, its surface alive with intricate runes that shifted and danced like liquid silver. She cradled it as if it were the last fragile link to her stolen voice, the one thing she longed to reclaim above all else. Moonlight filtered through the translucent crystals overhead, fracturing into countless shards of light that scattered across Elara's face. Her eyes, sharp and resolute, traced the patterns etched into the relic's core. The artifact was unlike anything she had ever encountered, both beautiful and unnerving, as though it harbored a secret that whispered just beyond reach. A soft, almost imperceptible vibration thrummed through her fingertips, growing steadily stronger. Elara's breath caught as the runes began to glow with an inner light, threads of ethereal energy spiraling upward like smoke in a silent breeze. The air around her seemed to thicken, charged with anticipation. Without warning, a sudden flash of light erupted from the artifact, bathing the stall in a radiant glow. From within its depths emerged a figure, ephemeral and shimmering, an ancient spirit bound to the relic itself. Its form flickered between shadow and light, a swirling mass of translucent hues that shifted with every heartbeat. The spirit's voice was at once alluring and chilling, a melody of whispers that echoed through the quiet market. "I am the keeper of lost words," it intoned softly. "The voice you seek lies within my grasp, but freedom demands a price." Elara's heart pounded fiercely as the spirit's gaze seemed to pierce through her very soul. It revealed that releasing it would restore her voice, but bind her to an unknown fate and entanglement with the bazaar's ancient magic that could neither be undone nor escaped. Torn between desperation and caution, Elara reached out slowly, fingertips trembling as they hovered over the artifact. The weight of her choice pressed down like the heavy night air, thick with the scent of exotic spices and the faint trace of ozone from lingering magic. Around her, the bazaar seemed to lean in, the stalls shifting imperceptibly as if watching her struggle. Reflections fractured in the shards of a nearby mirror, each shard capturing a fragment of her conflicted expression, hope mingled with fear, determination shadowed by uncertainty. The spirit's whispers grew more insistent, promising release and renewal, but warning of bonds unseen. Minutes stretched like hours as Elara wrestled with the decision. Every instinct screamed to grasp the chance to reclaim what was lost, yet the shadow of the unknown loomed large. The market's magic pulsed in sympathy, a living entity entwined with her fate. With a resolute breath, Ilara's fingers closed around the artifact. The spirit surged forth in a cascade of light and sound, filling the air with a chorus of ancient voices. A searing warmth blossomed in her throat, spreading through her chest, and suddenly, the silence that had gripped her for so long shattered like glass. Words her own voice spilled free, raw and trembling, but unmistakably hers. Yet beneath the triumph, a lingering echo of the spirit's warning whispered through her mind. A reminder that every bargain at the Crystal Bazaar demanded its toll. As the first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, the market began to dissolve like mist, the magic fading with the night. Ilara stood amidst the fading stalls, the artifact quiet once more in her palm, and a new resolve kindling within her spirit. The path ahead was fraught with peril, but she had taken the first step toward reclaiming her destiny. And somewhere deep within the shifting heart of the bazaar, unseen forces stirred, watching, waiting for the next move in the eternal game of bargains and secrets. The night was ending, but Ilara's journey was only beginning. Moonlight spilled like liquid silver over the Crystal Bazaar's shifting stalls, casting long, wavering shadows that danced to the silent rhythm of the hidden market's heartbeat. Ilara's footsteps were measured, each step echoing softly against the cobblestones, slick with the faint sheen of magical frost. After the night's chaotic bargains and solitary struggles, she found herself drawn toward a dim corner where voices soft, cautious, and laden with shared desperation wafted through the air like smoke. The corner was framed by stalls draped in twilight fabrics, their colors muted and ever-moving as if the bazaar itself refused to be pinned down. A flickering lantern hung from a crooked post, its flame trembling in the gentle night breeze, illuminating three figures huddled close. Ilara's heart tightened not from fear, but from a tentative hope she had not allowed herself in many moons. "You're Ilara," a voice whispered, brittle yet certain. The speaker stepped forward, a man with restless eyes and pale skin, his threadbare cloak embroidered with swirling symbols that seemed to writhe in the lantern's light. "I'm Kieran. I lost more than memories here." Ilara nodded, the weight of her own silence still fresh but less suffocating now. She gestured toward herself, then to the artifact she carried, a shimmering token of her desperate bargain. Kieran's gaze flicked to it, a mixture of curiosity and caution. From the shadows emerged two more figures. A slender woman, her hood casting a veil over sharp eyes that glimmered like stars, trapped in midnight blue. She moved with a nimble grace, shadows seeming to cling to her like a second skin. Beside her stood a broad-shouldered man, his scarred face etched with lines of regret and battle. Thick leather armor encased him, the weight of his past evident in every measured breath. "I'm Mira," the woman said softly, her voice a melody of whispered secrets. "And this is Thane. We've all paid in ways the bazaar counts, but does not forgive." Ilara's gaze swept over the group, tracing the invisible scars that bound them. Each carried a fragment of shattered dreams and stolen parts, a mosaic of loss created by the bazaar's merciless bargains. "We're trapped," Thane said, his voice gravelly but resolute. "But together, maybe we can find a way out." The words hung between them, fragile yet filled with promise. Trust was a rare currency here, more precious than the magical relics that glittered in the stalls. Yet Ilara felt the first stirrings of something unfamiliar, shared purpose. They settled around the lantern, their faces illuminated by its wavering glow as they exchanged stories in gestures and hurried scribbles on scraps of parchment. Kieran spoke of the memories he'd lost, names, faces. a life erased but faintly remembered in dreams. Myra revealed the relentless shadows that clung to her, a curse that twisted her form and threatened to consume her. Thane confessed the price of peace he'd bargained for, a fleeting respite now turned into chains of regret. Elara shared what she could, the artifact's strange power, the silent cost of her voice, the merchant's cryptic warnings. Together, their tales wove a tapestry of pain and resilience, each thread a testament to the Bazaar's cruel magic. As the moon arced higher, the market around them seemed to pulse, alive with unseen eyes and whispering winds. Suddenly, a shadow flickered between Stalzer's sharp movement that sliced through the fragile calm. The group tensed, hands instinctively moving toward hidden weapons or protective charms. Eyes darted, searching for the source. The Bazaar was never truly safe. Danger lurked in every corner, waiting to exploit any sign of weakness. "We must watch each other's backs," Mira said, her voice low but fierce. "Betrayal is as common as breath here." Elara nodded, the truth settling over her like a cold cloak. Yet, beneath the weight of suspicion, a spark of hope glimmered. Alone, their chances were slim. Together, they might turn the Bazaar's own rules against it. Plans began to take shape, maps pieced together from fragmented memories, whispered rumors of hidden chambers, and the secret paths that twisted like veins beneath the market's surface. They spoke of challenging the merchants, unraveling the bargains that bound them, and reclaiming the parts of themselves stolen in the dark. Hours slipped by, the first pale fingers of dawn brushing the horizon. The group rose, their silhouettes bathed in the waning moonlight. Ilara's heart beat steady, a rhythm that matched the growing resolve within her. "We move at first light," she said, her voice steady though still fragile, "together." A quiet chorus of agreement rose, unspoken but understood. As the Bazaar began to fade with the coming day, the travelers stood united, not just by their losses, but by the fierce hope that perhaps, in this shifting labyrinth of shadows and bargains, they had found something worth fighting for. Yet, even as they prepared to face the unknown, Elara sensed the Bazaar watching its mercurial magic stirring, aware that the game had changed. The night's alliances were fragile, but they were the first step toward breaking the cycle. And in the heart of the Crystal Bazaar, under the retreating moon, a silent vow was made that no voice would be lost without a fight. The path ahead was perilous, the stakes higher than ever. But for the first time in a long while, Elara dared to believe that dawn might bring more than just the fading of shadows. It might bring freedom. The Bazaar awaited their next move, its secrets shifting like smoke. But Elara and her newfound allies were ready to challenge its merciless bargains. The night was far from over. The chamber was not marked on any map, nor spoken of in the loud haggling that echoed through the shifting stalls of the Crystal Bazaar. It was a place that existed between moments, nestled deep beneath the gleaming crystal arches and veils of mistware. The air hummed with a muted magic, thick and expectant. Here, Elara found herself seated on a cold stone bench, the flickering luminescence of ancient runes barely lighting the faces of those gathered around a low, circular table. Her fingers trembled slightly as they brushed against the artifact wrapped carefully in worn, clothed, shimmering relic that had cost her her voice. Yet, in this dark sanctuary, surrounded by others burdened with their own silent weights, Elara felt a fragile thread of hope weaving through the night. Kalen, the wiry man with silver-streaked hair, leaned forward, his eyes flickering with cautious resolve. "We cannot speak freely here," he murmured, voice low but steady. "The Bazaar's ears are everywhere. Every word risks betrayal." Elara nodded, her throat tight with unspoken agreement. Words had betrayed her before. They had been the currency she lost most dearly. Yet here, in this chamber, silence was both shield and chain. It was a paradox she had come to understand too well. Myra, the young woman with violet eyes, moved gracefully, her fingers weaving patterns in the air. Her gloves shimmered faintly, inscribed with arcane runes that caught the soft light and cast dancing reflections against the stone. Each gesture was deliberate, a language in itself silent, yet profound. Alara watched, captivated. Myra's hands spoke of bargains made in shadows, of relics that hummed with forgotten power, of the delicate balance between desire and sacrifice. It was a language Alara was learning to understand, one born of necessity in this realm where voices could betray or be stolen. The whispering shade emerged then, coalescing from the shifting darkness in the corner of the chamber. Its presence was unsettling, a figure cloaked in undulating shadows, face forever hidden. The shade's voice was a breath, a whisper that seemed to crawl beneath the skin. "The merchants watch for cracks," it said. "Every slip in silence invites their grasp. We must bind ourselves to secrecy, lest the bazaar unravel us one by one." Alara's eyes met those of her companions, the weight of the shade's words sinking deep. They were bound not only by their mutual desperation, but now by a sacred pact, a vow to guard their plans in silence, to trust without the crutch of spoken reassurance. Kaelin reached into a pocket and produced a finely woven cloth, embroidered with cryptic runes that shimmered faintly as he spread it over the table's center. One by one, they placed their hands upon it. Alara's, wrapped carefully around the artifact. Mira's poised in silent invocation, Kellen's steady and resolute. As their palms met the fabric, the runes flared softly, a ripple of warmth spreading through the chamber. The pact was sealed not just in magic, but in shared purpose and unspoken promises. Ilara's gaze drifted to the artifact in her lap. It pulsed with a faint, steady light, as if acknowledging the new bond forged in this secret place. Though her voice was lost to her, her resolve had never been clearer. She would reclaim what was stolen, not only for herself, but for all who suffered under the bazaar's merciless bargains. The silence that now encased them was not empty. It was alive, charged with potential and peril. Each unspoken word was a weapon and a shield, each gesture a lifeline cast into the swirling uncertainty of the night. Outside, the bazaar continued its restless dance of shifting stalls and whispered deals, unaware that within this hidden chamber, a small resistance was taking root, silent, steadfast, and unyielding. Ilara's thoughts raced, her mind piecing together fragments of knowledge shared through signs and shadows. The relics, the bargains, the losses, they were threads in a tapestry far larger than she had imagined. To unravel it, she would need every ounce of cunning and courage she could summon. The Pact of Silence was their first step, a fragile alliance sworn in shadows. Yet it was also a tester reminder that in the Crystal Bazaar, even silence could carry a price. As the glow of the runes dimmed and the chamber's shadows deepened, Alara felt the stirrings of something new within her, a spark of hope intertwined with the ever-present danger that lurked beyond the walls. The night was far from over, and the true bargains had yet to be struck. But for now, in this quiet sanctuary beneath the moonlit market, they had each other and a vow unbroken. Ilara's eyes closed briefly, the weight of the silent pact settling over her like a mantle. Her voice was gone, but her story was just beginning. And in the darkness, the Crystal Bazaar waited, its secrets poised to reveal themselves to those daring enough to listen without words. The silence was not emptiness, it was a promise that the next step would come, and that the game was far from finished. As they rose from the table, the runes flickered one last time, casting fleeting patterns of light that danced like fireflies along the stone floor. Ilara tucked the artifact close, her heart pounding with the weight of the pact and the perilous path ahead. Outside, the bazaar's night deepened, full of shifting shadows and hidden bargains. Within, a quiet rebellion was taking root, silent, steadfast, and unyielding, and Ilara, voiceless but unbroken, was ready to lead it. The night stretched before them, a labyrinth of secrets, silence, and shifting fates. And with the pact sealed, the game had truly begun. The moonlight fractured through the crystalline archway, casting kaleidoscopic patterns that danced across the smooth stones beneath Ilara's feet. She hesitated, breath shallow, as the cool mist curled tendrils around her ankles, chilling her to the bone. The Crystal Bazaar was no ordinary market. It was a place where reality bent and twisted, and tonight it would test her mind as much as her body. As Ilara stepped forward, a soft whisper brushed her ears like silk sliding over glass. The voices seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once, murmuring doubts she had long buried. "You are not enough," one whispered, the echo curling through the mist like smoke. Another hissed, "You will lose more than your voice if you linger here." Her heart thundered, but she pressed on, eyes narrowing against the veil of phantom sounds. The path narrowed and opened again into a corridor draped with mirrors set into walls of shimmering crystal. Ilara's reflection fragmented, splintered into dozens of images that shimmered just out of focus. Some showed her as she was a determined, voiceless traveler, but others twisted her form, a woman broken by fear, a shadow steeped in regret, a ghost of what she might have been. One mirror rippled, and a reflection stepped forward, a version of Ilara, with tears streaming down her cheeks, lips parted in a scream she could no longer make. The silent image reached out, imploring, and Ilara felt the weight of all her lost words press upon her chest. The bazaar's magic was cruel, using her own memories and emotions as weapons. But alongside the fear, a spark of defiance ignited deep within her. She touched the cold glass, willing herself to see past the illusions. "I am more than your tricks," she thought fiercely. The images faltered, flickering like dying flames, before shattering into shards of light that scattered across the floor. Further down the path, the mist thickened, coalescing into the form of a spectral figure. It was someone Ilara knew, a lost loved one, their eyes heavy with sorrow and silent accusation. The apparition reached out with hands of mist, trying to draw Ilara into a world of illusions where pain and regret held sway. Ilara's breath caught, memories crashing against her resolve, but she gripped the artifact at her side, the cool metal grounding her in the present. "You are not real," she whispered silently, and the figure dissolved into the swirling fog. With every step, the bazaar seemed to pulse its magic, trying harder to ensnare her, but Ilara's understanding grew. The illusions were tests, challenges set to unravel her will. And with each victory, she peeled back another layer of the market's deceptive veil. As the first pale light of dawn threatened to spill over the horizon, the mist began to wane and the illusions flickered uncertainly. Ilara's breath steadied, her heart beat strong and steady. She had faced the bazaar's shadows and emerged clearer in purpose. Ahead, the path shifted once again, beckoning her onward to trials yet unknown. But now, armed with insight and resolve, Ilara was ready. The Crystal Bazaar might twist and deceive, but she would not break. "This is only the beginning," she thought as she stepped forward, the prisms of dawn catching fire in the crystals around her, lighting the way into the heart of the market's mysteries. The moon hung low and heavy, casting a pale silver light over the labyrinthine stalls of the crystal bazaar. Ilara's footsteps were soft against the cobblestones, her breath a shallow mist in the cool night air. The artifact she now held, a delicate, shimmering orb cradled in her palm, throbbed faintly with a pulse that seemed almost alive. Tonight, she was drawn not by the promise of new bargains, but by the whisper of memories long buried. She found herself standing before a pool of water nestled between two ancient, gnarled trees that seemed impossibly alive beneath the moonlight. The surface was unnervingly still, a perfect mirror reflecting the myriad twinkling lights of the bazaar around her. As Ilara gazed into it, the water began to ripple and shift, and soon images emerged, vivid, shimmering scenes from a past she had tried to forget. There, in the dancing reflections, she saw herself as a girl. Young Ilara was laughing, the sound pure and bright, echoing through a sun-dappled forest. She was with a figure cloaked in shadows, whose face remained just beyond clear view. The moment felt innocent, yet beneath it lurked an unsettling tension. Suddenly, the scene darkened. The laughter ceased abruptly, swallowed by an oppressive silence. The figure reached out, and light drained from Ilara's mouth, leaving her voiceless, frozen in a moment of loss. Ilara's breath hitched. She felt the cold grip of that silence tighten round her throat, an invisible chain forged in shadow and regret. The memory was raw, painful, yet necessary. It was the beginning of her cursed moment. Her voice was stolen. A whisper stirred beside her, soft as the sigh of the wind through glass. From the shadows stepped the whispering spirit, its form flickering like a flame struggling against the night. Its eyes, pools of endless twilight, seemed to hold the weight of countless secrets. "You seek the truth of your silence," it murmured, voice like the rustle of silk and the crackle of embers. "But truth is a blade that cuts both ways." Ilara nodded, her gaze unwavering despite the chill that crept through her bones. "Tell me, I need to know." The spirit drifted closer, its voice weaving a tapestry of revelation. Long ago, in a desperate moment, Ilara had sought power to protect those she loved. The price was her voice, her essence bartered away in a shadowed bargain with a force older than the bazaar itself. The artifact she now carried was part of that bargain, a key to unlocking the chains of silence if she could master its hidden power. But the spirit warned her the path to reclaiming her voice was fraught with peril. Darkness awaited, eager to reclaim what was lost. The cost might be greater than she imagined. Ilara's mind raced, fragments of her past colliding with the present. The artifact pulsed warmly in her hand, a reminder of the hope she clung to. She turned from the spirit and the shimmering pool, her footsteps quickening as the moon's glow began to pale in the approaching dawn. The bazaar's stalls shifted around her, illusions weaving in and out of existence. Yet beneath the chaos, a new clarity blossomed within her, fierce determination fueled by the painful truths she now carried. She would face the trials ahead. She would confront the shadows of her past and the mercurial bargains of the bazaar, and she would reclaim her voice, no matter the cost. But as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the lingering echo of a question whispered in her thoughts. Was the price she would pay truly hers to bear alone? Ilara's journey was far from over. The echoes from the past had spoken, and now the future awaited her choice. The air in the crystal bazaar was thick with tension, the very fabric of the market seeming to pulse with anticipation as Ilara stood at what felt like an invisible crossroads. The moon had risen higher, its silver glow casting a muted light over the labyrinth of stalls and shadowed passageways that twisted and turned with a life of their own. Lanterns hanging from crystalline branches shimmered faintly, their flickering flames whispering secrets that only the night could understand. Alara's breath was shallow, her heart pounding in her chest as she tried to steady the whirlwind of thoughts swirling in her mind. Every step she took echoed softly in the hollow spaces between the stalls, and the murmurs of distant voices, some human, others less so, drifted across the market like ghostly melodies. She felt the weight of the artifact she clutched tightly in her palm, the cool surface humming with latent magic, promising power yet demanding a price. Ahead, the bazaar shifted once more. Corridors folded inward, and a hidden alcove emerged, bathed in a pale, otherworldly light. It was here that Kale awaited her, his silhouette framed by the eerie glow. He was a man shaped by the bazaar's bargains, his lean frame wrapped in a dark cloak that swayed with unseen currents. His eyes met hers, sharp and searching, conveying a silent urgency. Without a word, they fell into a familiar rhythm of gestures and glances, communicating in the language Alara had learned to trust, one of silent understanding born of shared hardship. Kale's fingers traced a subtle pattern in the air, indicating the choice that lay before her. The market was no longer just a place of forbidden commerce, it was a crucible where destinies were forged and broken. The masked trader appeared then, stepping from the shadows as if summoned by the very tension that gripped Ilara's heart. Their silver mask was impassive, reflecting the kaleidoscope of the bazaar's shifting lights. In their hand, they held a mirror, its surface alive with swirling images, visions of possible futures, each more haunting than the last. Ilara approached cautiously, the mirror's glow drawing her closer. Within its depths, she saw herself walking alone, voice restored but isolated, the burden of her quest etched into every line of her face. Another reflection showed her surrounded by those she had chosen to help, their faces alight with hope and gratitude. But shadows lurking at the edges, threats born of the bazaar's wrath. The choice was laid bare: reclaim her voice at the cost of solitude, or embrace the peril of collective struggle to free others ensnared by the market's cruel bargains. Her mind raced, weighing the scales of sacrifice and gain. From the shadows, Sarah emerged, a frail figure cloaked in tattered robes, her eyes wide and shimmering with tears. Though her voice was barely a whisper, her presence spoke volumes. She reached out, her hand trembling as it found Ilara's around them. Other trapped souls gathered, their faces illuminated by the mirror's ethereal light, their hope fragile yet fierce. Ilara's heart clenched. The voices she had lost, the silence she had endured, was no longer just her burden to bear. It was a call to stand not only for herself, but for all who suffered in the bazaar's grasp. With a deep breath, Ilara made her decision. The artifact's pulse grew steady beneath her palm, a silent vow echoing in the night. She would fight not just for her voice, but for the freedom of all bound by shifting bargains and forbidden commerce. The bazaar seemed to respond, the air crackling with newfound energy. Stalls shimmered and flickered, shadows lengthened and recoiled, as if the market itself recognized the turning tide. But with the choice came danger, unseen eyes watched, and the weight of the bazaar's will pressed heavier upon her shoulders. As Ilara stepped forward, her allies by her side, the path ahead was uncertain. Yet in that moment, under the swirling silver sky, hope took root amidst the darkness. The crossroads of fate had been crossed, and the story of the Crystal Bazaar would never be the same. A faint sound stirred behind her, a warning, or perhaps a promise. Ilara dared not look back. Her voice might yet be lost, but her will was clear: to reclaim, to redeem, and to change the course of the night forever. The moon's light deepened, casting long shadows that danced with secrets yet to be unveiled. And in the heart of the bazaar, a new bargain was born, one that would challenge the very foundations of forbidden commerce and the shifting tides of destiny. Ilara's journey was far from over. The stakes had never been higher, and the night still held many secrets. But with every step, she moved closer to the dawn, where voices would rise, bargains would break, and the Crystal Bazaar's promise would be rewritten in the language of freedom. The night whispered on, carrying with it the fragile hope of a new beginning. The dim glow of the Crystal Bazaar's lanterns cast long, wavering shadows over the labyrinthine stalls as Ilara crouched beside the ancient artifact cradled in her hands. The air was thick with the scent of burnt sandalwood and a faint metallic temps that seemed to pulse with hidden energy. Her fingers traced the smooth, cool surface of the shimmering relic, a delicate lattice of crystal veins glowing faintly beneath its translucent shell. Each pulse of light seemed to beat in time with the restless rhythm of her heart. Her breath caught in her throat, a breath she could no longer speak aloud, and a sudden vibration thrummed through the artifact. It was as if the object itself was alive, breathing with a quiet desperation that mirrored her own. Ilara's eyes widened as a whisper, faint and almost imperceptible, curled through the silence inside her mind. It was not her own voice, but something else. A voice both foreign and intimately familiar, echoing within the confines of her thoughts. "Who's there?" she tried to ask, but her lips remained silent. Instead, she reached out with her mind, pushing past the panic that threatened to choke her. The whisper grew clearer, a murmur of ancient words, half-forgotten promises, and a plea woven with shadow and light. Suddenly, the artifact's glow intensified, bathing her face in a spectral radiance. The bazaar around her seemed to fade, the murmurs of commerce and footsteps dimming into a distant hum. Within this suspended moment, Ilara glimpsed a form emerging from the crystalline depths, swirling, shifting figure of light and darkness, flickering like a flame caught in a restless wind. The entity's presence was overwhelming, neither wholly benevolent nor cruel. It pulsed with a power that felt both imprisoning and seductive. A silent conversation unfolded between them, a dance of emotions too complex to voice aloud. The entity conveyed its yearning for freedom, its connection to the voice Ilara had sacrificed, and the price that freedom would demand. Ilara staggered back, the weight of revelation pressing down upon her. This was no mere lost voice. It was a living, breathing essence, bound within the artifact, trapped by the very bargain she had made. She realized, with a sinking heart, that reclaiming her voice was not a simple transaction. It was a dangerous pact with a powerful spirit whose desires might not align with her own. Gathering her courage, Ilara sought out the enigmatic merchant once more, weaving through the bazaar's shifting corridors until she found the shadowed stall where he awaited. His eyes gleamed with a knowing light, reflecting the glimmers of the market's magic. "You have discovered the truth," the merchant said, voice smooth and unyielding. "The voice you lost is not lost at all, but held captive by a force older and more cunning than you imagined." Ilara's gaze hardened. "What must I do to get it back?" The merchant's smile was inscrutable. "You must confront the entity, negotiate with Aitor, perhaps fight. But be warned, freedom comes at a price, and the cost is often more than a voice." A cold shiver ran down Ilara's spine as she pondered the gravity of her choice. The bazaar seemed to pulse around her, alive and watchful. Could she trust the entity? Could she survive the ordeal? That night, Ilara found herself drawn into a surreal vision within the heart of the bazaar. The world melted away, leaving her alone with the bound entity. It flickered between forms, sometimes pleading, sometimes menacing, its presence a mirror of her own fears and hopes. They communicated wordlessly, a communion of souls where intentions were laid bare and truths unspoken. The entity revealed fragments of its past, the reasons for its imprisonment, and the desperation for release that mirrored Elara's own yearning for her voice. She felt compassion stir in her chest, mingled with the steely resolve that had carried her this far. The choice before her was stark: to risk everything for the chance to reclaim her voice, or to resign herself to silence and the unknown consequences of her bargain. As the first pale fingers of dawn crept over the bazaar, Elara stood alone in its heart, the artifact heavy in her grasp. The fading moonlight cast long shadows that danced like ghosts, whispering of the perilous path ahead. Her hand tightened around the relic. Whatever awaited her, negotiation, conflict, or sacrifice, she was ready to face it. The price revealed was daunting, but Elara would not let the silence define her fate. The bazaar held its breath, and so did she. With a final glance at the fading market, Elara stepped forward into the unknown, the weight of her choice heavy but her spirit unbroken. The Crystal Bazaar was no stranger to whispers of rebellion, but until tonight, none had dared to strike a blow so bold, so palpable in its silence. Elara moved with purpose through the shifting corridors of the market, the artifact snug at her side, humming faintly, a quiet heartbeat against the chaos. Her voice, still lost to the cruel bargain she had made, was replaced by a steely resolve that radiated from her gaze. Around her, the hidden market pulsed with its usual eerie brilliance. Stalls glittered with forbidden relics and shadowy deals, but tonight, beneath the silver sheen of the moon, something different stirred. Travelers like her, those bound by silence, by lost parts of themselves, gathered in the dim recesses of the bazaar's labyrinth, drawn by Elara's unspoken call. The air was thick with anticipation, a fragile thread of hope weaving between them. Myra, her fiery-haired ally, was the first to meet her in the shadowed alcove behind a stall, trading in memories bottled like perfume. Their fingers intertwined briefly in a gesture of solidarity before Myra addressed the small group with urgent, silent gestures. Each traveler bore the marks of the bazaar's cruel bargains: missing voices, stolen memories, twisted limbs, but in their eyes burned a shared desire to break free. Elara laid out the plan with a series of sharp nods and drawn symbols in the air, her movements precise. They would disrupt the bazaar's rhythm, challenge the merchant's control by refusing to comply with the usual exchanges. The market, a living entity of magic and will, would not take such defiance lightly. As the group dispersed into the market's labyrinthine paths, the atmosphere thickened. Stalls began to shimmer uncertainly, their edges flickering like candles in a draught. The silent watchers, emissaries of the bazaar's merciless will, emerged from the shadows. Their forms were ghostly, faces blurred as if caught between worlds, and they moved with a predatory silence. The market's magic twisted, warping the very ground beneath Elara's feet. Elara's heart pounded as she felt the weight of countless unseen eyes. The artifact pulsed, a cool light spreading beneath her cloak. It responded to her need, a tether to strength and power beyond her own. When the first of the silent watchers lunged, Elara stretched out her hand, and a shimmering barrier of translucent energy erupted around her and her allies. The market's magic recoiled, but the barrier held, glowing like a shard of dawn in the endless night. The bazaar convulsed in response, its stalls warping and twisting, illusions shattering into shards of crystal and shadow. The struggle was silent but fierce. Each step Alara took was a defiance against the crushing weight of the market's ancient bargains. The travelers fought with gestures, glances, and the artifact's flickering power, their rebellion a chorus without sound, a dance of shadows and light. Time became a distorted rhythm. The moon traced its slow arc across the sky, and the bazaar's fury grew desperate. Yet, for every stall that crumbled or merchant who turned hostile, more voices joined the silent uprising. Alara, though still voiceless, led with a presence that rallied hope in the darkest corners of the market. As the first pale hues of dawn seeped into the bazaar's edges, the chaotic shifts began to subside. The silent watchers retreated, dissolving into smoke and silence, leaving behind fractured glass and scattered relics. Alara stood amidst the ruins of the market's resistance, breath steady despite the exhaustion that clawed at her limbs. Her eyes scanned the faces of her allies, weary, marked by loss, but alight with a new fire. The rebellion was far from over, but in this moment, a fragile victory was theirs. The Crystal Bazaar, for all its mercurial power, had been challenged. Alara's gaze drifted upward to the pale light of a moon that was fading fast. Somewhere beyond the shadows, her voice waited, lost, but not forgotten. And as the market's magic waned with the coming dawn, she made a silent vow. This was only the beginning. The market would remember, and so would she. The night had shifted. Alara had shifted it with her. But the question that hung between the fading stars was clear. How long could a spark burn in a place built on silence and shadows? The Crystal Bazaar would answer in its own time and in its own way. The moon hung high over the Crystal Bazaar, its pale light filtering through the intricate lattice of shimmering stalls and stalls that seemed woven from starlight itself. Yet beneath this radiant glow, Alara found herself at the threshold of a new and daunting challenge, the Crystal Labyrinth. It was whispered among the few who had glimpsed it that this maze was not merely a physical trial, but a crucible for the spirit. A place where the very fabric of one's will and fears could be tested and unmade. She stepped forward, the ground beneath her feet cool and smooth, as the entrance to the labyrinth opened like a maw of translucent quartz. The walls around her rose up, crystalline facets, catching and fracturing the moonlight into 1,000 dancing rainbows. Each step she took seemed to ripple the light, and the air hummed softly with a latent magic that stirred the hairs on her arms. The labyrinth was alive. Alara's breath, shallow but steady, coiled in little clouds before her lips, silent, yet she felt the weight of her own silence like a stone in her throat. The cursed muteness that had driven her here was both burden and motivator. Each silent step forward echoed with the unspoken pleas of her heart. The path ahead was not fixed. As if sensing her presence, the crystalline corridors shifted and folded in on themselves, refusing to settle. A corridor that had stretched wide and inviting moments before now narrowed into a jagged tunnel, its walls closing in like the clasp of a giant's hand. Reflections swirled on the facets, showing fleeting images, some of herself, others of things she could not quite place. Shadows of faces long forgotten, whispers of laughter and loss. At one turn, Alara found herself trapped within a cage of mirrored crystal. The walls reflected her image back at her. Fractured, multiply, echoed Alara, silent and desperate. Her own expression seemed to mock her, the voicelessness embodied in the staring eyes of her reflections. Panic fluttered briefly in her chest, but she forced herself to breathe, to steady her nerves. The labyrinth was testing her, and she must not falter. A soft, melodic hum began to fill the air, weaving through the corridors like a siren's call. From the shadows of a crystalline alcove emerged the whispering crystal, an entity formed from the very heart of the labyrinth. It shimmered with translucent light, pulsing gently, and its voice was a chorus of whispers that seemed to echo inside Ilara's mind rather than her ears. "Why do you seek what was lost?" it asked, its tone both curious and chilling. Though she could not answer aloud, Ilara's eyes met the shifting lights within the crystal. She gestured toward her throat, then to the artifact she carried, the shimmering relic she had traded her voice to possess. The whispering crystal's facets flickered with understanding. "Bargains bind more than flesh," it murmured. "To reclaim, one must unravel. But beware, the labyrinth does not yield its secrets lightly." The path ahead twisted and reformed, revealing a puzzle of shifting crystals embedded in the floor and walls. Each piece reflected a fragment of the bazaar's many bargains, some glimmering with hope, others darkened by regret and loss. Ilara moved carefully, each step a calculated risk, adjusting the crystals to align the paths of light and shadow. With each successful shift, the labyrinth's grip loosened, the walls pulsing less insistently, the air growing lighter. But with every move, the reflections grew more vivid, more insistent. Pressing her to confront memories she had long buried the moment her voice was stolen, the faces she could no longer call upon for help. Her fingers trembled, not from fear alone, but from the weight of choice. The labyrinth was a mirror to her soul, and to escape, she had to face not only the magic that ensnared her, but the pain she carried within. At last, with a final adjustment, the crystalline maze shuddered and began to dissolve, the walls melting into cascades of moonlight that flowed around her like liquid silver. Ilara stepped forward, her heart pounding but her spirit unbroken. Beyond the labyrinth lay the next stage of her perilous journey, the heart of the bazaar itself, where the ultimate bargains were struck, and where her voice awaited its reckoning. Yet even as she moved onward, the labyrinth's lessons lingered, the knowledge that every path could shift, every bargain could change, and only by mastering both the external magic and her own inner resolve could she hope to reclaim what she had lost. The night was far from over, and the crystal bazaar watched with glittering eyes as Ilara pressed forward, her silent vow burning brighter than any star. Ilara's footsteps echoed softly against the crystalline floor, the muted sound swallowed by the vast chamber ahead. The walls shimmered with translucent facets, each catching the moonlight that seeped from the bazaar's hidden crevices and fracturing it into a kaleidoscope of pale blues and silvers. At the center stood the merchant, still cloaked in their shifting fabrics, the veil concealing their face like a barrier between worlds. "You seek answers." The merchant's voice was a low murmur, smooth and measured, as if every word was weighed carefully before release. "But know this, knowledge here is as perilous as the bargains you make." Ilara's eyes narrowed. "I've paid a price already. I need to understand what I've gotten myself into. Who are you? What is this place really?" A faint smile played beneath the veil. The merchant raised a slender hand, fingers adorned with rings that caught the fractured light and slowly drew back the veil. The face beneath was both familiar and alien skin, pale yet luminous, eyes an ethereal shade of silver, deep and ancient as the night sky itself. A faint sorrow lingered in their gaze, an echo of centuries lived in shadow. The chamber pulsed with a subtle energy, the crystals resonating softly like a heartbeat in sync with the bazaar's magic. Ilara felt the weight of the moment, the air thick with secrets long buried. "I am called many names," the merchant began, voice now tinged with the weariness of ages. "But you may know me simply as the Keeper. I have watched over this market since its inception, a gathering forged from dreams and desperation, where the impossible is bartered in whispers beneath the moon. Ilara's breath caught. Why? Why the bazaar? Why the bargains? The keeper's eyes glittered with a mix of pride and regret. Long ago, when the world was still young and magic wild, there was a need and unspoken yearning in the hearts of those who dared to dream beyond their mortal limits. The bazaar was born from that need, a nexus where desire and consequence entwine. Here, every trade is a thread in a tapestry of fate, each bargain a shift in the balance between light and shadow. The crystals around them shimmered brighter, casting intricate patterns that danced like living stories across the walls. Ilara reached out, her fingertips grazing one, feeling a warmth that belied the cold appearance. "And your voice?" she asked quietly. "Is it just another thread in that tapestry?" A shadow crossed the keeper's face. "Your voice, your very essence, was claimed because you sought power without seeing the whole price. Many come here blinded by need, willing to give all for a glimpse of hope. But every gift from the bazaar carries a weight. To reclaim what is lost is to confront not just the magic, but the very nature of your own soul." Ilara's mind raced. The merchant's revelation untangled some of the mysteries, yet wove new complexities. The bazaar was no mere market. It was a living entity, bound to the desires and sacrifices of those who entered. "Then what is my path?" she demanded, voice steady despite the storm within. "How do I reclaim what was taken?" The keeper's gaze softened, a flicker of empathy breaking through their eternal composure. "You must walk through the mirrors of your own making, face the reflections of your fears and regrets. Only then can the bonds be broken. But beware, the bazaar does not yield its secrets easily, and the cost may be greater than you imagine." Outside, the moonlight waned, the first hints of dawn threatening to dissolve the magical veil that hid the market from the waking world. Ilara squared her shoulders. "Then I have no time to waste." The merchant inclined their head in solemn acknowledgement. "Very well. Step forward and face what lies beyond the veil of illusion. Your journey has only just begun." As Ilara turned to leave, the chamber's crystals pulsed one last time. A silent accord between the keeper and the traveler who dared to challenge the shifting bargains of the crystal bazaar. The merchant's true face remained etched in her memory, not just a foe, but a guardian of secrets, a keeper of balance in a world where every whisper beneath the moon could change destiny. The path ahead twisted into shadows and light, and Ilara knew that with each step, the stakes would rise. Yet with the truth unveiled, her purpose was clearer than ever. The bazaar's magic was formidable, but so was her will. And somewhere in that labyrinth of bargains and illusions, her voice awaited reclaiming. The night deepened, and the first echoes of dawn stirred beyond the crystal walls. Ilara's journey into the heart of the bazaar's enigma was far from over. The merchant's true face had been revealed, but the ultimate bargain, the one that would set her free or bind her forever still, loomed in the shadows ahead. With a final glance at the fading moonlight, Ilara stepped forward, ready to face the mercurial forces that held her fate in balance. Moonlight filtered through fractured crystal panes, casting fractured shards of silver onto the cold floor beneath Ilara's feet. The deeper she ventured into the crystal bazaar's labyrinthine heart, the more the air thickened with a sorrowful weight, a palpable silence humming with unsaid words and unfinished stories. The winding corridors now gave way to a cavernous chamber, its walls adorned with jagged crystals that seemed to absorb the faint light rather than reflect it. Shadows danced, shifting like living things, and from their depths came the faintest of whispers, barely audible yet utterly impossible to ignore. Ilara's breath caught as the whispers grew louder, coalescing into a chorus of silent cries that brushed against her mind like cold fingers. She instinctively pressed her hand to the artifact she carried, a shimmering relic that had cost her her voice, and felt its pulse synchronize with the haunting voices. They were not just echoes. They were the remnants of those who had bargained here before, souls trapped within the Bazaar's merciless grasp. The chamber's atmosphere thickened, and spectral forms began to materialize from the shadows. These silent echoes were translucent and fragile, their features blurred and shifting as though caught between worlds. Their eyes locked onto Alara with a mixture of pleading and warning. Though they spoke no words, their silent laments filled the space with a profound sadness that settled deep in Alara's chest. She stepped forward cautiously, her gaze scanning each apparition. She could almost hear their memories. Fragments of bargains made in desperation, voices traded for power, limbs for knowledge, time for eternal binding. The weight of their sacrifices hung heavy in the air, a chilling reminder of the Bazaar's true cost. Alara's own loss felt suddenly less isolated, part of a greater tapestry of pain woven through the market's cruel magic. Kneeling near the center of the chamber, Alara found an ancient crystalline altar that pulsed with a dark, rhythmic energy. Its facets were etched with symbols older than memory, glowing faintly as if breathing with the Bazaar itself. The silent echoes circled it like mournful guardians, their forms flickering in the dim light. The altar was the heart of the Bazaar's power, the source that bound the voices and souls trapped within its domain. A cold wind swept through the chamber, carrying with it a voiceless roar that shook the crystals and sent shards tinkling to the floor. Alara's heart pounded as she realized the Bazaar entity, the unseen force that governed the market, was aware of her presence. It was a presence felt rather than seen, an oppressive stillness that pressed upon her mind, challenging her resolve. Alara steadied her breathing, clutching the artifact tightly. She thought of the voice she had lost, the desperate bargain she had struck, and the countless others who had suffered similar fates. The silent echoes, silent pleas, had ignited within her a fierce determination. She would not become another lost soul bound to the Bazaar's cruel game. Summoning every ounce of courage, Alara stepped toward the altar, her fingertips brushing the cold crystal surface. The energy surged through her, a tempest of power and pain that threatened to overwhelm her senses. Images flashed before her eyes, faces twisted in regret, bargains sealed with trembling hands, voices silenced forever. But amidst the chaos, a single truth crystallized. Only by confronting the entity and embracing the true cost of her quest could she hope to reclaim her voice and free those trapped alongside her. Her silence was no longer an absence, but a weapon, a shield forged from the echoes of the past. With resolve hardening like steel, Alara prepared herself for the confrontation that would decide not only her fate, but the fate of all who had dared to trade with the crystal Bazaar. The night deepened, shadows lengthened, and the chamber pulsed with anticipation, waiting for the moment when the silent would speak once more. "I will not be silenced," she vowed, her eyes blazing with an unspoken promise. "Not by this place, not by its bargains." As the altar's light flared, the silent echoes gathered closer, their forms shimmering brighter, as if lending her their strength. In the heart of darkness, Alara found a spark of hope, a beacon to guide her through the shifting labyrinth of the Bazaar's endless bargains. The echoes in the dark had become her call to action, and with that, the true battle for voice and freedom began. The moment Alara stepped beyond the shimmering veil, the air itself seemed to hum with a profound stillness. as if the very heartbeat of the crystal bazaar pulsed beneath her feet. The chamber she entered was unlike any place she had witnessed, so far a vast expanse carved from translucent crystal, its walls alive with a soft, internal light that shifted in hue from icy blue to molten gold. Prisms scattered fragments of this light in 1,000 directions, painting the surfaces with colors that danced and flickered like living flames. Her footsteps made no sound upon the polished floor, and the usual murmur of the bazaar's shifting stalls was replaced by a reverent silence. Here, at the heart of the market, time seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. Alara's eyes scanned the space, catching the faint outlines of suspended shards, suspended in mid-air like frozen stars. It was in this sacred place that all bargains were born and all debts ultimately collected. From the shadows, a figure emerged, a presence that seemed woven from the very essence of the bazaar's magic. The entity, as Alara had come to understand, was the sovereign of this realm, the arbiter to whom every trade, every whispered promise was owed. Its form was a shifting tapestry of light and shadow, an ethereal silhouette whose contours rippled with crystalline brilliance. Where eyes might be, there were pools of starlit glass that reflected the depths of countless bargains past. Without words, the entity spoke. Its voice was a chorus of whispered winds and fragile chimes, resonating deep within Ilara's bones. "You have come to reclaim what was lost," it intoned, the sound both invitation and challenge, yet every gift here demands a price. "Tell me, traveler, what will you surrender to regain your voice?" Alara's throat tightened with the weight of silence, but she did not falter. With steady hands, she lifted the artifact, the shimmering relic that had both empowered and cursed her. She traced its contours, the cool surface humming faintly beneath her fingertips. Then, turning inward, she gestured to herself, to the void where her voice once lived. Her eyes met the entity's unblinking gaze, conveying resolve beyond the need for speech. Around her, the chamber responded. Fleeting images flickered to life, phantoms of past traders caught in the web of their own bargains, faces etched with regret and hope, victories and loss. The tapestry of the bazaar's legacy writhed in the crystalline air, a reminder that nothing here came without consequence. The entity considered her silently, its form pulsing with a slow, deliberate rhythm. At last, it spoke again. "The voice you seek is bound to the essence of your soul. To reclaim it, you must relinquish a fragment of what makes you whole. What will you offer in exchange?" Alara's mind raced through the possibilities, the memories she cherished, the dreams she dared not speak aloud, the very identity she clung to. To sacrifice any part of herself meant risk, but to remain voiceless was a fate she could no longer endure. In that moment, clarity emerged, forged by desperation and courage. She reached deep within, drawing forth a silent vow born of her journey, a promise to protect others from the bazaar's grasp, even at personal cost. Though words failed her, her intent shone clear. The entity's crystalline eyes glimmered, acknowledging the gravity of her choice. A wave of radiant energy surged through the chamber, enveloping Ilara in a warm embrace that traveled from her throat outward. The familiar tightness eased, replaced by a blossoming warmth that spread like firelight within her chest. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, a faint whisper echoed in her mind, a prelude to speech, the stirrings of a voice reborn. Yet, in the depths of the entity's gaze, there lay a shadow, a silent warning that the bargain forged tonight was but one thread in an intricate tapestry. The price paid would bind Alara more deeply to the bazaar's magic, setting her on a path where freedom and fate intertwined in ways yet unseen. As the chamber's light dimmed, and the heart of the bazaar resumed its eternal pulse, Elara stood ready. Her voice was hers once more, but the journey was far from over. Beyond the veiled corridors and shifting stalls awaited the consequences of her final bargain and the promise of a dawn that would test the mettle of her reclaimed spirit. With a breath that carried the weight of 1,000 silent nights, Elara stepped forward. The first words she would speak, echoing against the crystalline walls, a whisper of hope, defiance, and the unyielding will of a traveler who dared to reclaim her voice. The night's magic hummed around her, a symphony of light and shadow, as the crystal bazaar awaited its next chapter, forever changed by the courage of one who bargained with the heart of the market itself. And so, with the dawn still hours away, Elara's story continued, her voice a beacon in the darkness, a promise unbroken beneath the ever-watchful moon. Elara stepped cautiously into the heart of the crystal bazaar's core, a chamber unlike any she had encountered before. The air shimmered with a crystalline haze, and the walls stretched infinitely, formed entirely of mirrors that fractured and reassembled with every breath she took. Each mirror reflected not merely her image, but warped and twisted versions of herself, some distorted by fear, others by rage or sorrow. The murmurs of countless whispered voices filled the space, a dissonant chorus of doubt and accusation. Her footsteps echoed softly, the only sound she could make on her own. The voicelessness she bore was nearly suffocating here, surrounded by so many reflections of herself, each speaking in silent cries. She raised a trembling hand, fingertips brushing a nearby mirror, and was startled when the surface rippled like water, revealing a fragile figure, a fractured version of herself, pale and trembling. This first illusion's eyes were downcast, lips quivering in a silent sorrow that mirrored Elara's deepest fears, the fear of loss, of failure, and of being forever trapped in silence. The fragile Elara reached out, her hands shaking as if begging for reassurance. Elara's heart ached, and despite the entity's cold trial, she felt a surge of compassion. Tentatively, she reached forward, her fingers grazing the illusions. The mirror shattered into a cascade of glistening shards that drifted upward like fireflies, their light soft and warm. The chamber pulsed, and from the shadows emerged a second fractured self. This one was darker, a shifting silhouette whose blurred features made it difficult to discern. Its movements were erratic, voice a haunting echo of Elara's own silence. It whispered accusations, the words impossible to hear but heavy with regret and self-doubt. It taunted her with every mistake she had made, every bargain she'd sealed in desperation. Elara's breath caught as the shadows swirled around her, the weight of her regrets pressing down like a storm. She steadied herself, drawing on the strength she had cultivated through her journey. "I am not defined by my regrets," she thought fiercely, her eyes blazing despite her lack of voice. The shadowed illusion recoiled, flickering and thinning as Elara's resolve solidified. Slowly, it too dissolved into motes of shadow that dispersed into the crystalline air. Before the last echoes could fade, a sudden burst of light and movement erupted within the chamber. From the fractured mirrors stepped a fiery, defiant version of Elara, eyes blazing with fierce determination. This illusion radiated a tempest of emotion, a challenge to fight for what was hers. The defiant Elara's stance was confrontational, her energy crackling like a storm ready to break. Elara met this fiery gaze without hesitation. Though voiceless, her spirit roared louder than any words. She embraced this strength, feeling the tempest within her grow until the entire chamber trembled. The entity that had governed this trial revealed itself a swirling mass of crystalline shards and shadow, its glowing eyes fixed intently on her. The entity spoke without sound, its presence a test of will and spirit. Alara knew that overcoming this trial meant more than reclaiming her voice. It demanded reconciliation with every fractured piece of herself, drawing on compassion for her fears, acceptance of her regrets, and the burning fire of her defiance. She reached out beyond the illusions to the very core of her being. With a surge of inner light, the mirrors shattered in a brilliant explosion of color and sound, scattering the fractured reflections into nothingness. The entity recoiled, its hold weakening as Ilara's silence began to break. A faint sound, a whisper of a breath, escaped her lips, a fragile promise of the voice she was about to reclaim. As the chamber settled, the air thick with the scent of ozone and renewal, Ilara stood taller, her eyes shining with newfound clarity. The path ahead was still fraught with danger, but she had crossed a pivotal threshold. The shattered reflections were no longer fragments of her torment, but pieces of her strength, forged anew in the heart of the crystal bazaar. And as the first note of her reclaimed voice stirred in the silence, Ilara knew her journey was far from over yet. She had taken the most crucial step toward freedom. The chamber's light dimmed, shadows retreating as the entity's form dissolved into the crystalline mist. Ilara felt the weight of her silence lift, replaced by a quiet power that thrummed deep within her. With the trials behind her, she prepared to face what awaited beyond, her voice a beacon in the gathering darkness. But the bazaar was not finished with her yet. The final bargain loomed on the horizon, and the true cost of freedom had yet to be revealed. Ilara inhaled deeply, her voice ready to break through the silence. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she was ready to speak. The night was far from over. The chamber at the heart of the crystal bazaar pulsed with a strange, almost sentient light. It was as if the very air hummed with anticipation, the walls shimmering with crystalline facets that refracted the moonlight into spectral colors. Ilara stood alone, save for the presence that waited, the mysterious entity bound to her lost voice, a force both terrifying and mesmerizing. Her heart beat fiercely, each pulse a drum of resolve and dread. "You have come far, Ilara," the entity's voice whispered, weaving through the chamber like silk and steel. "But freedom demands a price." Its form shifted, a flicker between shadow and radiant light, eyes glowing with ancient knowledge. "What are you willing to give in exchange for the voice you sacrificed?" Ilara's breath caught. In the months since she first lost her voice, since she traded it for the shimmering artifact, she had learned the harshness of silence, the isolation, the helplessness. Yet, to reclaim her voice now meant offering something precious in return. The bazaar had never been a place of simple bargains. She thought of the memories that anchored her, moments of joy, laughter, and love that had shaped who she was. The happiest times with her family, the warmth of her mother's embrace, the sound of her own laughter echoing in distant fields. Could she give these away? Would she still be herself without them? The entity's gaze bore into her, unyielding. Choose or remain forever voiceless. Ilara closed her eyes, reaching deep into the well of her soul. The decision burned within her like a searing flame. Finally, she whispered silently, a vow to herself, and stepped forward. A thread of shimmering light unraveled from her chest, delicate and glowing, weaving itself toward the entity. It was a memory, precious and irreplaceable, the last vestige of her laughter with her mother on a spring afternoon. As the thread slipped away, she felt a sharp pang, a hollowing ache that spread through her being. The memory faded, replaced by a cold emptiness. The chamber trembled. The crystal walls flickered, the colors shifting violently as the bazaar itself seemed to gasp. Patrons in distant stalls felt the tremor, whispers of change rippling through the hidden market. Then silence, and then a sound, a voice, Ilara's voice, raw, hoarse, but undeniably hers. She opened her mouth and breathed out a word. The sound fragile but profound, hello. Tears pricked at her eyes as the weight of silence lifted. The world around her seemed to exhale with her, the market alive with new energy, some stalls glowing brighter, others flickering and fading into shadows. The balance of power within the bazaar was shifting, uncertain and volatile. The merchant who had first sold her the artifact appeared beside her, face unreadable beneath his hood. "The price was steep," he murmured, "but you have changed the rules." Ilara nodded, voice steadying. "Freedom always demands a price. But I will pay it, whatever comes next." As dawn approached, the murmurs of the bazaar grew louder. The night's magic altered irrevocably. Ilara knew this was not the end, but a beginning, a new chapter in her journey, and in the fate of the Crystal Bazaar itself. Yet, deep inside, a quiet question lingered. What had she truly lost, and could she ever reclaim what had slipped away with that memory? The night held its breath, waiting for the answer. The dawn crept slowly, a pale wash of light bleeding through the crystalline lattice that crowned the hidden market. Ilara stood motionless amid the fading luminescence of the stalls, their once vivid hues now muted, as if the very soul of the Crystal Bazaar was sighing its last breath before the sun claimed the sky. The familiar hum of whispered bargains and clinking relics had softened to a distant echo, leaving a profound silence that pressed against her chest, heavy yet somehow filled with fragile promise. Around her, the other travelers stirred, their faces etched with the myriad stories of the night, stories of loss, sacrifice, and newfound strength. Mira, with her silver-streaked hair catching the last glimmers of magical lantern light, approached quietly. Her pale blue eyes held a depth of gratitude and an unspoken question about what lay ahead. Joran's broad figure emerged from the shadows, his scarred face softened by a rare, genuine smile as he offered a nod of solidarity. Ilara's gaze swept over the market one final time, taking in the stalls that shimmered like shards of forgotten dreams. The scent of moonflowers mingled with the faint metallic temps of enchanted relics, a fragrant memory of the night's forbidden commerce. Somewhere, a bell tolled softly, its chime a melancholic farewell. "It's almost time," Myra whispered, her voice steady despite the weight of parting. Ilara nodded, the absence of her own voice a stark reminder of the cost she had paid and the battles still to come. Yet, beneath the quiet resolve, a spark of hope blazed fiercely. The artifact she held pulsed gently in her palm, its magic now intertwined with her own essence, a beacon guiding her beyond the market's ephemeral realm. Joran shifted his weight, breaking the silence. "The bazaar won't be here when the sun rises. We have to choose stay in this fading shadow or step forward into the world, uncertain but free." The group exchanged glances, the decision hanging heavy but clear. The Crystal Bazaar, with all its shifting bargains and enigmatic powers, was a realm of night and secrecy. To remain was to be bound forever to its cycles. To leave was to embrace an uncertain dawn. From the shadows, the merchant watched, his figure cloaked and inscrutable. The flickering light revealed the faint curl of a smile beneath his hood, a smile that held no hint of farewell. Only the promise of the bazaar's return and the endless dance of bargains yet to come. Ilara stepped forward, her feet steady on the crystalline floor that now began to dissolve into mist and moonlight. The air shimmered, the boundary between worlds thinning as the market unraveled with the coming day. She felt the pulse of the artifact quicken, as if urging her onward. "We go together," she finally signed, her hands moving with deliberate grace, a silent vow to face the unknown alongside those who had become her allies in this strange twilight. Myra and Jorin nodded, their expressions resolute. As the first golden rays of dawn breached the horizon, the bazaar shimmered and faded like a waking dream. The magical lanterns dimmed, the stalls dissolved, and the labyrinth of shifting corridors vanished into the morning mist. The forbidden commerce of the night was over for now. Emerging from the dissipating veil, Alara inhaled deeply, the crisp morning air filling her lungs with the freshness of possibility. The world beyond awaited vast, unpredictable, and free of the bazaar's shadow. But as her gaze lifted to the brightening sky, a quiet question stirred within her heart. What new challenges and destinies would this dawn bring? The Crystal Bazaar had ended, but Elara's journey was only just beginning. She walked forward, her steps light but purposeful, carrying with her the lessons of the night and the promise of a new day. And somewhere, far beyond the fading market, the faintest whisper of a new bargain began to stir in the air. The morning sun cast long shadows over the quiet streets as Alara and her companions made their way from the hidden entrance where the Crystal Bazaar once stood. The world seemed larger now, filled with colors and sounds. She had long forgotten the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the distant call of birds, the soft murmur of waking life. Myra paused to touch a patch of wildflowers growing at the edge of the path, their petals delicate and alive with the sun's warmth. "It's strange," she murmured, "to feel so rooted again." Jorin chuckled softly. "Roots and wings. We've been given both. Now it's up to us to choose which to nurture." Alara smiled, a silent but genuine smile that reached her eyes. Though her voice was still fragile, the artifact's power hummed within her, a tether to the magic of the bazaar, but also a shield against its darker temptations. Together, they walked toward the waking city, carrying the weight of their past bargains, but also the hope of forging new paths untethered by the market's shifting shadows. The dawn was no longer a farewell to the night, but a promise, a new chapter, in a story that would continue long after the Crystal Bazaar's lights had dimmed. And Alara, at last, was ready to speak her own truth. The fading echoes of the bazaar whispered faintly in her mind, a reminder that some bargains never truly end. Yet, as the sun climbed higher, warming the earth and bathing the world in light, Alara felt a quiet strength welling within her. The market's magic had changed her, but it would not define her. With one last glance back to where the mist still clung to the empty space where the bazaar had been, she breathed in deeply and stepped forward into the endless possibilities of the dawn. The Crystal Bazaar had vanished for now, but the promise of the future and the lessons of the night would endure forever. And so would she. The first light of dawn spilled gently across the horizon as Alara stepped through the worn wooden gate of her village, the quiet streets still wrapped in the hushed remnants of night. The Crystal Bazaar, with all its shifting shadows and whispered bargains, had faded into memory, or so she hoped. Yet, the pendant resting against her chest pulsed faintly, a soft heartbeat of light beneath her coarse linen shirt. It was a reminder that the market's magic had not released its hold on her entirely. She moved with cautious steps, her eyes adjusting to the familiar shapes of the village houses. The scent of dew-laden earth mingling with the faint aroma of freshly baked bread from a nearby oven. The villagers, early risers tending to their daily chores, cast curious glances her way. Some paused mid-task, their brows knitting as if sensing something elusive but unsettling about her return. At the center of the village square, Mira awaited, her auburn curls catching the sunlight like embers. Her green eyes were wide with unspoken questions, a smile hesitant but warm. Ilara approached silently, unable to greet her in words but not lacking in the language of gestures. A small nod, a gentle hand extended, and Myra grasped it firmly. "You've changed," Myra said softly, her voice a hesitant thread in the morning calm. Ilara could only offer a small, enigmatic smile, the pendant's light flickering in response. The silence between them was not empty. It was filled with the weight of everything left unsaid, the burden of the voice lost and the magic gained. Days passed, and the artifact's presence grew more palpable. In the quiet solitude of a woodland clearing, Ilara felt it stir anew. The air shimmered with whispers, faint, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to emanate from the very leaves and shadows. The crystal's glow intensified, casting prismatic colors across the mossy ground. Ilara's heart quickened not with fear, but with a profound awe. The bazaar's magic was alive beyond its hidden market, seeping into the veins of the world she thought she knew. Returning to the village market, Ilara noticed subtle, unsettling changes. Strangers seemed to hesitate as they passed, their eyes flickering with recognition or dread. Conversations faltered. A child's laughter stilled mid-air. The invisible threads of magic tugged at the fabric of everyday life, weaving a tapestry of tension that only Ilara fully perceived. Mira approached her one evening as the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky painted in bruised purples and golds. They sat together in the flickering candlelight of Ilara's modest home. Wordless yet deeply connected, they shared the silent language born of years of friendship and recent trials. The pendant's glow cast dancing shadows on the walls, shadows that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the bazaar itself. What now? Myra's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears. Ilara's gaze was steady, though her voice was hers once again. The road ahead was anything but certain. The echoes of the bazaar lingered, woven into the very essence of the artifact she bore. It was a beacon and a warning, a promise of power and peril intertwined. As night deepened, a breeze stirred the curtains, carrying with it the faintest hint of crystal chimes and echo from a world just beyond reach. Ilara's resolve hardened. The journey she had begun under the moon's silver gaze was far from over. Beyond the fading shadows of the bazaar lay new mysteries, new bargains, and new dangers. Her voice was returned, but the true test was only beginning. The magic that had followed her back into the waking world whispered of challenges unseen, of alliances unformed, and of a destiny that would demand everything she was willing to give and more. In the quiet moments before sleep claimed her, Ilara held the pendant close, its light a steady pulse against her heart. The crystal bazaar had vanished with the dawn, but its echoes would resonate in her life forever. And somewhere, beneath the surface of the ordinary world, a new chapter of forbidden commerce and shifting bargains awaited. The night had ended, but the story was far from over. The night was unusually still, the kind of silence that pressed against the ears and made every small sound feel amplified. Ilara sat beside the campfire, the dancing flames casting shifting shadows across her face. Her fingers absently traced the edge of the shimmering artifact she had bargained for, the one that had returned her voice but had not lifted the full weight of her curse. She tried to speak, to break the silence that had clung to her for so long, but the words came out uneven, as if her voice was still finding its place in the world. "It's not enough," she whispered to the stars above, the sound barely louder than a breath. The warmth of the fire did little to soothe the chill that lingered inside, her a cold reminder that the curse was far from gone. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft rustle of footsteps approaching. Soren, the mystic she had sought out after the bazaar's fading magic, settled beside her, his pale eyes reflecting the flickering flames. The voice was just the beginning, he said quietly, his tone heavy with ancient knowledge. What you carry now is a shadow of the curse, a residue that feeds on your fears and doubts. It clings to your very essence, waiting for cracks in your resolve. Alara nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. How do I fight something I can barely see? Soren's gaze grew distant for a moment. Then he reached into his robes and pulled out an old, leather-bound book. There are rituals, symbols, and incantations designed to bind and banish such shadows, but they demand courage, and more importantly, allies. As dawn approached, Alara found herself in Soren's study, a room dimly lit by candles whose flames flickered in the drafty air. The walls were lined with ancient tomes and scrolls, their spines cracked and pages yellowed by time. Myra, a fellow traveler who bore the marks of her own bargains, stood nearby, her silver hair catching the candlelight. Together, they watched as Soren drew arcane symbols on the floor, arranging candles and crystals in a precise pattern. Suddenly, a dark mist began to coalesce in the center of the circular, swirling, whispering shadow that seemed alive. Its whispers were unintelligible, but carried a tone of menace that made Alara's skin crawl. The shadow twisted and writhed, reaching out with tendrils of darkness that seemed to probe their very souls. This is what remains of your curse, Soren intoned. It feeds on your insecurities. You must face it, not as a victim, but as a warrior. Alara squared her shoulders, the resolve in her eyes hardening. She stepped forward, repeating the incantation Soren had taught her. The words flowed from her lips with increasing strength, her voice no longer faltering, but steady, commanding. The shadow recoiled, its whispers turning into anguished cries that echoed around the room. The air was thick with magic, charged and electric. The battle between Alara and the shadow stretched long into the night. Each phrase she uttered chipped away at the darkness, but the shadow fought back with cunning, exploiting her deepest fears. At times, she faltered, the echo of old despair threatening to overwhelm her. But Myra's steady presence and Soren's guidance anchored her, reminding her of the strength she had earned through her trials. Finally, as the first light of dawn seeped through the study's windows, the shadow began to dissipate. It shrieked one last time before evaporating into the air, leaving behind a profound silence. Alara's chest heaved with exertion, but a fragile peace had settled within her. She stepped outside into the fresh morning air, the rising sun casting golden hues upon the world. The curse's weight was lighter now, though she knew it was not entirely gone. Still, the voice she had reclaimed felt freer, more her own. And in that moment, Alara allowed herself a small, hopeful smile. The journey to break the curse had taken her through darkness and doubt, but with each step forward, she reclaimed not just her voice, but her very self. The lingering curse was a shadow, yes, but shadows could be cast away by the light of resolve and the strength of allies. And Alara was determined to see the dawn through. The night had been long, the battle with the lingering curse a test unlike any she had faced before. Yet, as the sun climbed higher, Alara felt something she hadn't in years, a cautious hope blossoming in her heart. The voice she had bargained for was no longer a fragile thing, but a beacon calling her forward into the unknown. The shadows of the past might linger, but they would no longer define her. Her journey was far from over, But for the first time, Alara believed she had the strength to break free entirely. And with that belief, the promise of a new beginning shimmered just beyond the horizon. The Crystal Bazaar was never truly empty, even as the moon climbed higher and the night deepened. Alara, now more attuned to its shifting rhythms, found herself drawn to a corner of the market she had not explored before. The air here was thick with the scent of rare spices and something else, something electric and unnameable, that pricked her senses and set her heart racing. She stepped through a veil of shimmering moonlight and emerged into a crowded alcove where figures huddled close, whispering hurried bargains and exchanging furtive glances. The glow of a nearby stall caught her attention. A faint green light pulsed from within, casting eerie shadows that danced across the faces of those gathered. Among them, a young boy stood out. His auburn hair was tousled, and his hazel eyes flickered with a mixture of hope and fear as he clutched a small satchel tightly to his chest. Alara watched silently, memories of her own arrival flooding back. The desperation, the yearning, the unspoken bargains that had cost her so dearly. The boy's presence was a stark reminder that the bazaar's allure was as potent as ever, drawing new souls into its labyrinthine web. As she moved away, a voice slipped through the murmurs, a smooth, confident tone that made her pause. "First time here?" the man asked, stepping from the shadows. He was tall and slender, dressed in midnight blue robes embroidered with arcane symbols that shimmered faintly in the moonlight. His pale blue eyes gleamed with a knowing light. Alara regarded him cautiously. "Soren," he said, offering a bow that was more theatrical than sincere. "I know the bazaar well, though I've never bargained here myself." She raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite herself. "How is that possible?" "There are many ways to navigate the bazaar," Soren replied with a sly smile. "Not all require sacrifice. Some, however, demand a keen mind and a silver tongue." They spoke at length, Alara gradually peeling back layers of his guarded knowledge. Soren spoke of the bazaar's history, its shifting corridors, and the cyclical nature of its bargains, how every gain came tethered to a loss. How voices, memories, and even souls were traded like coins in a never-ending game. Their conversation was interrupted when a figure approached a woman cloaked in shifting hues, her face partly hidden beneath a hood. Alara recognized her immediately from whispered tales. Mira, a keeper of secrets and bearer of an ancient relic whose power was both feared and revered. Myra's green eyes pierced through the dim light as she beckoned Alara aside beneath a canopy of crystal chandeliers. "You must understand," she whispered, "the bazaar is a cycle. Every bargain made feeds into the next, binding us all. It does not end with your voice, Alara. Others will come, drawn by the same hunger and desperation." Alara nodded, the weight of Myra's words settling deep within her. She thought of the boy she had seen moments before, of the countless others who would follow the same path, ensnared by promises too costly to keep. As the night waned and dawn's first light threatened the bazaar's existence, Alara found herself at the market's edge, watching as new travelers were drawn toward the hidden realm. Their faces were alight with hope and fear, their steps hesitant yet determined. The bazaar's magic was fading for now, but its influence lingered, a shadow stretching beyond the confines of the market itself. Ilara's heart swelled with conflicting emotions. Relief that the immediate danger was passing, unease at the knowledge that the cycle would begin anew with these fresh arrivals, and a fierce determination to break the chain once and for all. She sought out the boy again, stepping forward with a gentle smile. Though her voice was still fragile, she found ways to share what she had learned, to warn him of the costs ahead. In their silent exchanges, a fragile bond formed, one that promised resilience against the bazaar's relentless grasp. Around her, the market pulsed with quiet energy, as if it watched and waited for the next move in this endless game. Alara knew her journey was far from over. The bargains would shift, the consequences ripple outward, and the bazaar's mysteries would continue to beckon. But for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope, not just for herself, but for all who would dare to challenge the market's dark promises. She tightened her grip on the artifact at her side, a symbol of both her sacrifice and her resolve. The night was ending, but the fight was only beginning, and Alara was ready. The Crystal Bazaar, with its glowing stalls and shifting shadows, faded into the light of dawn, but its secrets endured in the hearts of those who had walked its labyrinth. Alara stepped beyond its threshold, her thoughts alive with the knowledge that new bargains would be made, new voices lost and found, and that the tale of the hidden market was far from finished. Her journey had changed her, weaving her fate ever tighter with the enigmatic forces that sustained the bazaar. As the sun rose, she vowed silently to protect others from the seductive dangers of forbidden commerce, to break the cycle of shifting bargains, and to reclaim not just her voice, but the voices of all who had been silenced. The road ahead was uncertain, but Alara's resolve burned bright a beacon in the twilight between worlds. And somewhere, deep within the fading magic of the Crystal Bazaar, the cycle awaited its next chapter. Alara's footsteps echoed softly against the polished stones of the Crystal Bazaar's lesser-known alcoves, where few dared to wander past the midnight hour. The air here was thick with the scent of dust and forgotten enchantments, a stark contrast to the vibrant chaos of the market's outer stalls. Clutched tightly in her hand, the artifact hummed with a subtle energy, a pulse synchronized with the beating of her own heart. Ahead, a tall figure awaited her beneath an archway draped in shimmering blue silks. Mira, the archivist, regarded Alara with an expression that blended curiosity and solemnity. Her violet eyes gleamed faintly in the dim light, reflecting the countless secrets she had unraveled within these walls. "You've come far," Mira said, voice soft but steady. "Few seek the truths buried beneath the bazaar's surface. What you hold is more than mere trinket, it is a vessel of ancient power." Alara nodded, her gaze fixed on the artifact. "I need to understand it, to know what I bargained for." They moved deeper into the chamber, shelves towering high and heavy with arcane tomes, relics encased in glass, and scrolls tied with faded ribbons. The silence was punctuated only by the soft rustle of pages and the faint crackle of magical wards that lined the walls. Mira reached for a large, leather-bound volume, its cover embossed with symbols resembling those etched faintly on the artifact. "This is the Codex of Eldrin, a chronicle of relics and the spirits bound within. Few possess the knowledge to interpret its texts." Opening the book, she traced a delicate finger across the yellowed pages. "The artifact you carry is known as the Heartstone of Eloria. It was crafted centuries ago by a conclave of mages seeking to bind powerful spirits to objects, granting wielders access to their magic. But such power always demands a price." Ilira's fingers trembled slightly. "A spirit is trapped inside." "Yes," Mira confirmed. "An ancient entity of immense magic, bound through rituals now lost to time. The spirit's essence fuels the Heartstone's power, but it is also a prisoner, yearning for release." The artifact pulsed more strongly, its glow shifting from a cool sapphire to a fiery crimson. A faint murmur, like a whisper carried on the wind, seeped from the relic. Ilira's breath caught. "Can it speak to me?" she asked. Mira nodded. "With patience and caution. The spirit's voice is fragmented, caught between freedom and confinement. Elara closed her eyes, centering herself. Faint syllables formed in the silence, ethereal and haunting. The voice was at once ancient and sorrowful, a lament woven from centuries of captivity. Suddenly, the chamber shimmered. The air thickened with magic, and the bound spirit's shape flickered into view. A translucent figure with eyes like molten starlight, shifting between mist and faintly humanoid form. It reached toward Elara with ghostly hands. "Free me," it pleaded, voice resonating deep within her mind. "Release me, and your voice shall return." Elara's heart pounded. The cost was clear, yet the promise was too vital to ignore. Mira's calm voice broke through the tension. "The ritual to free the spirit will demand a sacrifice, perhaps more than you anticipate. The legacy of this relic is one of power entwined with loss." Elara swallowed hard, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. "Then I must prepare. Whatever the cost, I will reclaim what was taken." As the first pale light of dawn seeped through the narrow windows, Elara stepped outside the chamber. The bazaar was quieter now, its magic fading with the waning night. She looked back once at the glowing artifact in her palm, feeling the pulse of the bound spirit entwined with her own fate. "This is only the beginning," she whispered, the words falling silently from lips still heavy with the remnants of her curse. The crystal bazaar stirred around her, alive with hidden power and untold secrets, waiting for the next chapter of bargains and destinies to unfold. Elara's journey had deepened into a legacy far older and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The relic's past was entwined with her future, and the cost of freedom loomed larger than ever. With resolve burning bright beneath the fading stars, she prepared to face the ancient magic that bound her and the spirit within the Heartstone, knowing that what came next could change not just her fate, but the fate of the bazaar itself. And as the moon dipped below the horizon, the whispers of the relic's legacy echoed in the still night, promising power, peril, and the fragile hope of redemption. The night air hung heavy with the scent of rain and cold stone as Elara stepped cautiously into the narrow alleyway. The faint glow of flickering lanterns cast long shadows that danced along the walls, twisting and stretching as if alive. Her breath came in shallow wisps, each step measured and hesitant, the weight of silence pressing down on her like a physical force. She was no longer in the shifting labyrinth of the Crystal Bazaar, but back in the waking world, where the echoes of her past awaited like ghosts unwilling to rest. A figure emerged from the darkness ahead, a silhouette she knew all too well. Mira, her sister, stood waiting, the sharp angles of her face carved by years of hardship and unspoken grievances. Her eyes, cold and piercing, locked onto Elara's with an intensity that made her heart seize. The silence between them stretched taut before Myra's voice broke it, a blade cutting through the quiet. "You left," Myra said, her tone brittle like cracked glass. "You vanished without a word, and now you return as if nothing has changed." Elara opened her mouth, but no sound came. The curse that had stolen her voice had been lifted, but the habit of silence lingered like a shadow. She met her sister's gaze with a mixture of shame and defiance, willing the words to form, to bridge the gulf between them. "I had to survive," Elara finally managed to convey through a strained whisper, her hands trembling. "I had no choice." Myra's expression softened, the cold edge giving way to something more vulnerable, yet the hurt remained etched deep. "Survival came at a price, Elara. You left me behind." The weight of those words settled heavily on Elara's chest. Memories flooded back, of nights spent alone, of promises broken, of the unbearable loneliness that had driven her to the Crystal Bazaar in search of a solution. The bargains she had made, the sacrifices she'd endured, all unraveling in this moment of reckoning. Before she could respond, a sudden movement caught her eye. From the shadows stepped another figure, Fallon, a man whose presence was as enigmatic as it was unsettling. Once a trusted friend, now an adversary marked by betrayal and secrets. "So the prodigal returns," Fallon said with a sardonic smile, his voice low and filled with years of bitterness. "I suppose you think you can fix what you broke." Ilara's gaze hardened. "I'm not here to fix the past. I'm here to face it." They moved to a nearby chamber, dimly lit by a single flickering candle. The air was thick with tension as Fallon recounted the fractures that had splintered their bond. Bargains struck behind backs, the lies whispered in desperation, the trust shattered like fragile glass. "You think you've escaped the Bazaar's grasp," Fallon muttered, "but every choice has its cost, and some debts never die." Ilara listened, her heart aching with regret, yet fueled by a growing resolve. She understood now that the past was not a chain to bind her, but a tapestry she needed to weave anew. As their conversation ended, a subtle sound drew her attention, a soft rustling from the shadows. The silent messenger emerged, their face hidden beneath a dark hood, footsteps silent as the grave. They extended a folded parchment, the edges crisp and worn. A warning, the messenger intoned without words, their presence unnerving yet strangely comforting. Ilara unfolded the note with trembling fingers. The cryptic words spoke of dangers lurking beyond the Bazaar, of forces that sought to claim what little freedom she had won. The message was a summons to vigilance, a reminder that her journey was far from over. Later, beneath a vast canopy of stars, Ilara stood alone on a quiet hill overlooking the sleeping city. The cool night breeze whispered through the trees as she closed her eyes, feeling the pulse of the artifact in her palm. And then she spoke softly, clearly, a single word carried on the wind: enough. It was the first true word she had uttered in weeks, a declaration that she would not be silenced again. With the past behind her and the future uncertain, Ilara embraced the fragile hope that perhaps she could rewrite her story. But as the shadows lengthened and the stars flickered overhead, the whispers of the past lingered, reminding her that freedom was a fragile thing, and the Crystal Bazaar's influence might yet reach beyond the veil of night. Her voice was hers once more, but the journey was far from over. Somewhere in the distance, the market's magic stirred, waiting for the next bargain to be struck. The night air was thick with an unnatural chill as Ilara emerged from the twisting corridors of the Crystal Bazaar, her breath visible in the cold, moonlit air. Above her, the sky churned with dark storm clouds that had not been there moments before, swirling with hues of deep violet and sickly green, crackling faintly with errant magic. The hidden market, usually a place of strange wonder and shifting bargains, now seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy that pressed against the boundaries of the waking world. Ilara's eyes narrowed as she scanned the horizon, the faint scent of burnt ozone and something metallic lingering on the breeze. The Bazaar's magic, once contained within the labyrinthine stalls and crystalline halls, was spilling outward, corrupting the land beyond its borders. This was no longer merely a place of secret commerce, but a nexus of dark forces threatening to unmake reality itself. "It's worse than I feared," came a voice from behind her. Soren stepped forward, his staff tapping softly against the cobblestones. The middle-aged watcher's normally calm, blue eyes were shadowed with worry. "The storm you see is the manifestation of the Bazaar's unraveling. The magic that sustains it is bleeding out, and with it, the darker elements bound within are breaking free." Ilara turned to him, the weight of her quest momentarily eclipsed by this new threat. Can it be stopped? Soren shook his head slowly. Not by conventional means. The bazaar itself is a living, shifting entity. Its magic responds to bargains made, debts owed, and desires spoken in whispers beneath the moon. But when the balance tips, as it has now, the consequences spill over. We must confront the source directly. Together, they descended deeper into the bazaar, the familiar crystalline walls now shimmering with a sinister distortion. The corridors twisted unnaturally, reflections in the mirrors fracturing into grotesque shapes that flickered at the edge of Alaro's vision. Somewhere within this labyrinth was the heart of the market's magic, the place where old bargains were born and where their unraveling might be halted. As they moved, Alara felt the artifact at her side pulse with a strange warmth, a beacon in the growing darkness. Lyra joined them, her auburn hair catching the flicker of lantern light as she unfurled a worn scroll covered in arcane symbols. "These runes," she said, tracing a finger over the pulsing marks, "tell of a convergence, a moment when the bazaar's magic becomes unstable and the boundaries between worlds thin. It's what's causing the storm." The three shared a glance, understanding the stakes. Illyra's voice was still lost to the curse, but her resolve burned brighter than ever. They had to act swiftly. At the heart of the bazaar, the air grew thick and heavy, charged with an electric tension that made the hairs on Illyra's arms stand on end. The merchant awaited them beneath a canopy of flickering lanterns, his presence as enigmatic and unsettling as ever. His cloak shimmered, rippling like liquid glass, and his hood shadowed the contours of a face that seemed both ancient and ageless. "You have come far, Illyra," the merchant said, voice smooth and cold. "But the storm you seek to quell is not merely a consequence, it is a reckoning. The bazaar demands balance, and your actions have tipped the scales." Illyra met his gaze, fierce despite her silence. Her companions stepped forward, Soren's grip tightening on his staff, Lyra clutching her scroll like a talisman. "Then tell us what must be done," Soren said, voice steady. The merchant's smile was thin and unreadable. "A sacrifice, a bargain unlike any before. To bind the dark forces, one must give what they hold most dear. Are you prepared to pay such a price?" The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. With no time to hesitate, Illyra nodded, determination blazing in her eyes. She could not let the darkness consume the world she had only just begun to reclaim. Together, they prepared the ritual, Lyra arranging candles that flickered against the crystalline walls, their flames dancing in defiance of the howling wind that seemed to seep through the bazaar's very stones. As Illyra began the incantations learned from whispered lore and hard-fought lessons, the dark storm outside roared louder, thunder shaking the ground beneath their feet. The artifact throbbed with power, its ancient spirit stirring in response to the ritual's call. Shadows writhed and twisted, forming monstrous shapes that lunged at the edges of the circle, but the light held firm. Illyra's heart pounded with hope and fear as she poured every ounce of her will into the binding spell. Suddenly, a rift tore open in the air, a jagged tear through which a surge of chaotic energy spilled, threatening to overwhelm them. The merchant stepped forward, extending a hand, his voice cutting through the cacophony, "Hold fast, or all is lost." Together, they pushed against the storm's fury, the ritual's glow intensifying until it was a beacon of pure light. Slowly, the tempest began to recede, the dark clouds unraveling like smoke on the wind. When silence returned, broken only by the distant call of a night bird, Illyra felt the artifact's pulse steady, its burden eased. The storm had been weathered, but the gathering darkness was far from gone. The bazaar, though contained for now, still whispered its promises and threats beneath the moon's watchful eye. Ilara knew her journey was only beginning, and the storm was waiting. The moon hung low and heavy over the hidden recesses of the crystal bazaar, its pale light filtering through the ever-shifting crystalline walls that composed the market's labyrinthian heart. Ilara's footsteps, silent but resolute, echoed softly as she navigated the twisting corridors, guided by flickers of arcane light and the whispered legends of those who had come before her. Her journey had brought her here, to a place whispered of in the darkest corners of the bazaar, the sanctum of the Crystal Watchers. These guardians, she had learned, were the unseen eyes and ears that tracked the bazaar's ceaseless flow of forbidden commerce and magical relics. They were the keepers of balance, the only force standing between the market's seductive promises and its devastating consequences. The chamber she entered was unlike any other she had seen in the bazaar. The walls shimmered with a soft blue luminescence, casting an ethereal glow over the gathered figures seated around a massive orb that pulsed with light as though alive. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and ancient magic, a heady perfume that prickled her senses. A tall figure rose as Ilara stepped forward, their robes catching stray beams of moonlight like facets of a gem. A crystalline mask obscured their face, leaving only eyes that glimmered with quiet intensity visible. "Welcome, traveler," the figure said in a voice both calm and commanding. "I am Seren, leader of the Crystal Watchers." Ilara inclined her head, her heart pounding with a mixture of reverence and urgency. "I seek allies," she said, the words forming silently on her lips, then spoken aloud with a steadying breath. "The bazaar's dangers grow. I cannot face them alone." Seren's eyes softened with understanding. "You are not the first to come seeking aid, nor the last. But alliances here are fragile, forged in the crucible of trust and necessity." From the shadows stepped a wiry man, his fingers adorned with rings that hummed softly with arcane energy. "I am Kalen," he introduced himself, his eyes flicking over Ilara with sharp curiosity. "I read the currents of relic power, tracing their ripples through the bazaar's fabric." A woman with silver-streaked hair adjusted her spectacles and nodded. "Mira," she said simply, "I interpret the bargain's shifting clauses. The market's contracts are as alive and dangerous as the relics they bind." Together, they formed a circle around the glowing orb, which flickered and shifted, revealing images of distant corners of the bazaar and beyond. Dark shapes stirred in the shadows, forces that sought to exploit the bazaar's power for ruinous ends. Soren's voice lowered, heavy with foreboding. "The bazaar is changing. The bargains grow darker, the stakes higher. If left unchecked, the market's influence will spill beyond its hidden realm, threatening all worlds it touches." Ilara's gaze hardened. "Then we must act." Kalon extended a hand toward the orb, tracing glowing lines that represented the flow of magical energy. These relics pulse with power, but their energies are unstable. Each bargain sends ripples that echo through the market's crystalline walls. We watch and listen, but the threats are growing too great. Myra's voice was steady but urgent. "Many who enter the bazaar are unaware of the fine print. The bargains twist and turn, ensnaring souls in unexpected ways. If we do not intervene, more will be lost." Ilara swallowed the lump of fear rising in her throat. The weight of her own lost voice pressed on her, a silent reminder of what was at stake. But here, among these watchers, she found a sliver of hope, a chance to turn the tide. Together, they began to weave plans, mapping the shifting corridors and plotting ways to counter the bazaar's encroaching darkness. The chamber hummed with renewed energy, a convergence of wills bound by a common purpose. As dawn approached, Alara stood with her new allies, the first rays of morning light threatening the bazaar's ephemeral presence. The crystal walls shimmered, fragile yet unyielding, mirroring Elara's own resolve. "We move forward," Seren declared. "The time to confront what lurks beneath the surface is near." Alara nodded, the ember of determination blazing within her. "For the voices lost, for the futures stolen, we will fight." The Crystal Watchers had opened their ranks to her, and with their guidance, Alara felt the stirrings of a rebellion that could reshape the fate of the Bazaar. Yet, beneath the hope lay the unspoken truth. Every action here came with a price. As the market's magic pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, Alara knew that the coming nights would test her in ways she had never imagined. But armed with allies and purpose, she was ready to face the shadows and reclaim not only her voice, but the freedom of all who had been And somewhere deep within the crystalline labyrinth, the bazaar itself seemed to watch, waiting to see if the traveler and her watchers could withstand the storm gathering at its heart. The night was far from over, and the game was only just beginning. The heart of the Crystal Bazaar pulsed with an otherworldly light, a convergence of shimmering hues that twisted and danced like a living prism. Ilara's footsteps echoed softly on the crystalline floor, her breath steady despite the weight of countless Isem unseen. Others shimmering just beyond the veil, watching, waiting. The air was thick with the scent of ancient magic, a potent blend of ozone and something floral, faintly bittersweet. She stepped deeper into the core, where the murmurs of the market faded into a profound silence, broken only by the soft hum of power radiating from the glowing entity at the center. Before her floated the entity, an ever-shifting constellation of light and shadow that seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. Its presence was both mesmerizing and terrifying. It was the living embodiment of the bazaar's power, the keeper of all bargains made and all debts owed. The entity's many voices whispered simultaneously, a chorus of promises and regrets, hopes and fears. Alara felt their weight pressing against her mind, urging her to speak, to bargain, to choose. At her side, the merchant emerged from the shadows like a wraith, his form cloaked in fabrics that flickered like the night sky, his eyes glinting with cold calculation. "You have come far, Alara," he said, voice smooth as silk, yet edged with something sharper. "But the final bargain is not for the faint of heart. What are you willing to offer in exchange for that which you desire most?" Alara met his gaze steadily, the memories of every step she'd taken in this shifting market flashing through her mind, the silence that had once imprisoned her, the faces of those she'd met and lost, the echo of bargains that had cost more than coin. She thought of her voice, stolen and yet still a part of her, a tether to her own sense of self. But beyond that, she thought of the others trapped by the bazaar's cruel bargains, their fates intertwined with hers. "I offer my freedom," she said quietly, "not just for myself, but for all bound by these chains." The merchant's smile was a slash of moonlight on dark waters, enigmatic and unsettling. "A noble sentiment," he said, "but freedom is a costly gift." From the shadows, Leora stepped forward, her silver-streaked hair catching the ambient light. She placed a steadying hand on Ilara's arm, a silent gesture of alliance and courage. Their eyes locked, communicating without words the strength they drew from one another. The market around them seemed to breathe in response, the walls of crystal shimmering with newfound intensity. The entity's myriad voices rose in a crescendo, swirling around Alara like a tempest. "The bargain you propose is unprecedented," it intoned, "yet the cost must be balanced. What will you sacrifice to sever these bonds?" Alara swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down like the very night sky. She thought of her voice, the essence of her identity, the price she had already paid. But she also thought of the future, the possibility of a dawn where the Bazaar's shadow no longer loomed over desperate souls. "I will give up my silence," she declared, "and in exchange, I offer to bind myself to the Bazaar's fate, to carry the burden of its secrets, so others need not." A hush fell over the chamber as the words settled into the air. The merchant's eyes gleamed with a mixture of respect and calculation, while the entity pulsed brighter, the swirling lights coalescing into a radiant orb. The Bazaar seemed to tremble, the crystalline walls quivering as if in recognition of the gravity of this final pact. Suddenly, the market shuddered violently. Crystals fractured and reassembled, corridors twisted and reformed, and the very fabric of the Bazaar's magic began to unravel and reweave itself. Alara braced herself against the shifting ground, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. The sacrifice she had made was immense, but the possibility of liberation glimmered just beyond the chaos. As the light dimmed and the market's form stabilized, Alara felt a whisper return to her lips, a sound she thought lost forever. It was faint, fragile, but unmistakably her own voice. Yet with it came a responsibility, a new path forged from the crucible of sacrifice and courage. The merchant inclined his head, a final, enigmatic gesture. "The game is not over, but you have changed its rules." Alara looked toward the horizon where the first hints of dawn kissed the edges of the Bazaar's fading light. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and shadows yet unseen. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, her voice was hers again, and with it, the power to shape her own fate and those of others bound by forbidden bargains. The final bargain had been struck, an echo that would resonate far beyond the Crystal Bazaar, heralding a new chapter of hope, sacrifice, and the enduring struggle for freedom. "This is just the beginning," Alara whispered, her voice steady and clear, carrying the promise of midnight's resolve into the coming dawn. The crystalline heart of the Bazaar pulsed before her, a beacon of impossible light amid shadow and shifting illusions. Alara's breath caught in her chest, despite the silence that had become her constant companion. The market, with all its whispered promises and shattered dreams, waited for her next move. Here, at the core of forbidden commerce, stood the source of her torment and, maybe, her salvation. She fixed her gaze on the throne of ever-glowing crystal, its facets refracting a myriad of colors that danced like captive flames. Around it, the shadows writhed, as if alive, twisting through the stalls and corridors with a sinister grace. The enigmatic merchant's presence was palpable, though the figure itself remained cloaked in shimmering mystery. "You think you can defy the cycle?" The voice, when it came, was layered, echoing, as if spoken by countless tongues. The merchant stepped forward, the fractured crystal mask reflecting Eloros's determined eyes back at her, multiplied and distorted. Eloros's heart hammered, but her resolve was steel. She raised her hands, fingers trembling with the weight of magic she had barely begun to master. "I will end this. No more bargains that steal lives and voices. No more chains that bind the desperate. The Crystal Bazaar's cycle ends tonight." A cold laugh rippled through the air, a sound like cracking ice. "Foolish girl, the Bazaar is eternal. It feeds on need and desire. Break the cycle, and you break yourself." Behind her, Footsteps echoed. Lyran and Mira emerged from the labyrinthine shadows, their eyes bright with shared purpose. Lyran's voice was steady despite the tension. "We stand with you, Alara. This ends now." Myra's hands rose, weaving invisible patterns that shimmered into threads of light, connecting with Ilara's own. Together, they began the ritual complex dance of magic and will that sought to undo centuries of binding power. The very air seemed to hum, saturated with the weight of countless bargains made and broken, lives lost and voices stolen. Fractures spread across the crystal throne, the mask of the merchant splintering to reveal a glimpse of the ancient force beneath a swirling storm of trapped voices and broken promises. The bazaar itself convulsed, stalls flickering like dying stars, corridors twisting and unraveling. Ilara's muscles burned with effort, but she pressed on, the threads of magic tightening, binding to the very essence of the bazaar's power. The chains of silence that had once bound her began to dissolve, shimmering dust falling like snow upon the crumbling ground. "This is not the end," the merchant warned, the voice now tinged with desperation. "The cycle may break, but the hunger remains." Ilara's eyes met theirs, fierce and unyielding. "Then we will be the ones to feed it differently, on hope, not despair." As the final strands of magic snapped free, the bazaar's glow dimmed, and the market began to fade like a waking dream. Ilara, Lyran, and Mira stood amidst the ruins, breathless and changed. The cost was unknown, the future uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, the air felt lighter, the silence less oppressive. Ilara's fingers brushed her throat, searching for the echo of a voice reborn. The journey was far from over, but the cycle was broken, and with it the promise of freedom flickered bright in the moonlight. Yet, as the last shadows slipped away, a whisper lingered, an unspoken question in the night. What new bargains would dawn with the breaking of the old? The heart of the crystal bazaar pulsed dimly beneath the waning moonlight, its usual vibrancy now fragile, teetering on the edge of collapse. Ilara stood at its center, surrounded by the allies who had become her family in this shadowy realm: Kaelin, Mira, and Thorin. They formed a tight circle, their faces illuminated by the faint glow of fractured crystals strewn across the ground like scattered stars. The air was thick with anticipation, a heavy silence broken only by the quiet hum of latent magic. Ilara's gaze swept over her companions, each bearing the marks of their arduous journey, scars, weariness, but above all, an unyielding resolve. This night, they would attempt what many deemed impossible, to dismantle the bazaar's power through the sheer force of their united voices. Kaelin, the guardian of ancient sound magics, stepped forward, his silver-threaded cloak brushing the crystalline floor. "Our voices are more than mere sound," he intoned softly. "They are the essence of will, identity, and freedom. Together, our song can shatter the chains the bazaar has wrought." Myra nodded fiercely, her scarred hands clenched into fists. "The market thrives on silence and secrecy, on bargains made in desperation. It fears our unity, it fears our voices." Thorin's steady presence anchored them all. "Then let us give it cause to tremble." Ilara inhaled deeply, summoning the courage to begin. Though her voice had been reclaimed only recently, it still felt fragile, a flickering flame against the howling winds of the bazaar's dark enchantments. She closed her eyes, reaching deep inside for the song that had been buried beneath years of silence. A single note escaped her lips, pure and trembling. Kaelin answered with a low chant, weaving ancient melodies into the fabric of the air. Myra's sharp, clear tones cut through the darkness like shards of glass, and Thorin added a deep, resonant hum that grounded their harmony. Their voices braided together, rising in a crescendo that echoed through the labyrinthine market. The crystalline structures that formed the bazaar responded, their surfaces vibrating, glowing faintly with prismatic light. The sound waves shimmered visibly, weaving through the stalls and corridors, a luminous tapestry of hope and defiance. But the bazaar was no passive victim. Shadows writhed and twisted, coalescing into tendrils that lashed out to silence the burgeoning chorus. The air thickened, cold and oppressive, as if the very market fought to preserve itself. Ilara's heart pounded as the tendrils neared, threatening to snuff out their song. Yet, the bonds forged in shared struggle held firm. Their voices wove a protective barrier, a shield of sound that repelled the darkness. Each note grew stronger, more vibrant, their unity transforming individual frailty into collective power. "Hold fast," Kalen urged, his voice steady amidst the chaos. "Our strength lies not in a single voice, but in the harmony we create." The chorus surged, their song a beacon piercing the bazaar's shadows. The crystalline walls cracked, glowing fissures spreading like veins of light. The market trembled, its magic unraveling thread by thread. Ilara felt a swelling joy mixed with bittersweet sorrow. This place, a nexus of forbidden bargains and lost hopes, was breaking apart. Yet it had shaped her, tested her resolve, and forged her purpose. As the first pale light of dawn seeped into the fading night, their voices soared in a final, triumphant crescendo. The radiant wave they released washed over the bazaar, dissolving its bindings and scattering its illusions like mist. Silence followed, pure and profound. The market was no more. Ilara opened her eyes, breathless but unbroken. Around her, her allies smiled, tears glinting like stars in the new light. They had faced darkness and emerged united, their voices a testament to resilience and hope. "This is not the end," Ilara whispered, her voice steady and clear. "It is the beginning of a new song." And with that promise, she stepped forward into a world forever changed, guided by the chorus of voices that would never again be silenced. The air trembled with a strange, crackling energy as the crystal bazaar began to unravel. Stalls that once shimmered with enchanting wares flickered like dying constellations, their magical glow sputtering and fading beneath the waning moon. The labyrinthine corridors, so familiar and yet ever shifting, now twisted unnaturally, shadows stretching and contorting in ways that defied logic. The very ground beneath Ilara's feet vibrated with a deep, resonant pulse, the heartbeat of a dying magic. Ilara stood at the heart of the market, the place she had come to know as both prison and battleground. The crystal entity loomed before her, its translucent facets refracting the moonlight into a kaleidoscope that danced with prismatic hues. Its form was elusive, shifting between humanoid outlines and abstract crystalline structures, embodying the enigmatic spirit that governed the bazaar's balance. The light around it flickered erratically, betraying the instability threatening its existence. "Why do you resist?" The entity's voice chimed, an otherworldly resonance that echoed in Ilara's mind rather than her ears. The bazaar was born to sustain the delicate equilibrium of desire and sacrifice. Without it, chaos will reign. Ilara met the refracted gaze of the entity with unwavering resolve. Equilibrium, it is a cage that binds us, all merchants, travelers, even you. The cycle of bargains, strips, voices, memories, and souls. It ends tonight. Before the entity could respond, a sudden presence manifested beside Ilara the merchant. The shroud of illusion that once cloaked him unraveled, revealing a figure far more complex and human than the enigmatic trader she had known. His face bore the lines of age and burden, his eyes a turbulent sea of pride and desperation. "You think you can end this?" he sneered, voice low and edged with bitterness. "The bazaar is eternal. It is not merely a place, but a force one that feeds on the desires of mortals and immortals alike." "Then let it starve," Elara retorted, stepping forward, her gaze fierce and unyielding. The confrontation sparked a cascade of shimmering fractures throughout the market. Crystals embedded in the stalls cracked and splintered. Magical sigils etched in the air dissolved into wisps of smoke. The very essence of the bazaar's enchantment began to dissipate. The intricate web of bargains and bindings unraveling with each pulse. Allied travelers who had fought alongside Elara appeared, their faces etched with relief and apprehension. They too felt the shifting tides, their own bonds loosening as the market's fabric frayed. Yet, with freedom came uncertainty. The bazaar had been a source of power, danger, and survival. Its absence left a void. "We must leave," Elara urged, her voice now reclaimed and steady, "before the market vanishes entirely." The group navigated the collapsing labyrinth, passages shimmering and folding like waves caught in a storm. The scent of ozone hung heavy, mingled with the fading aroma of exotic spices and arcane metals. Echoes of whispered bargains and lost voices lingered like ghosts in the air. As they emerged into the pale light of dawn, the first rays of sun caressed the empty space where the Crystal Bazaar had been. The hidden market, with all its wonders and horrors, was no more. Elara inhaled deeply, the crisp morning air filling her lungs, a stark contrast to the stifling silence she had endured for so long. Though the bazaar was gone, its lessons and scars remained etched in her soul. The battle was won, but the future was uncharted, a new dawn for those who had dared to bargain with the impossible. Her gaze lifted to the horizon, determination burning bright. The promise she had made under the moonlight endured, to protect others from the seductive dangers of forbidden commerce, to ensure that the legacy of the Crystal Bazaar would be remembered not as a prison, but as a warning. And somewhere, deep within the fading echoes of shattered crystals and silent voices, a new chapter awaited. The lingering glow of the vanished bazaar played tricks on the eyes, as if remnants of its magic clung stubbornly to the waking world. Elara's footsteps were steady, yet her heart raced with the weight of what had been lost and what might yet be gained. Around her, the allied travelers shared quiet words, their voices a balm to the tension that still clung to the morning air. "Do you think it can truly be over?" a young man asked, his eyes reflecting both hope and fear. Elara looked back at the empty space where the bazaar had once thrummed with life. It must be, but endings are rarely clean. The cycle might be broken, but the world will remember. And so must we. The merchant's parting words echoed faintly in her mind, a reminder that some forces, once unleashed, could never be fully tamed. Yet Elara was no longer the voiceless traveler she had been. She was a beacon of change, a living testament to the power of choice and sacrifice. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows behind them as they stepped forward together, leaving the remnants of the Crystal Bazaar behind. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it was theirs to choose. And beneath the fading stars, a silent vow took root within Elara's heart, promised to guard the fragile balance between desire and consequence, to be the voice for those still lost in the shadows of forbidden bargains. The bazaar's end was not just a conclusion, it was a beginning. The dawn was gentle, a slow unfolding of light that softened the sharp edges of the world. Elara stood on the crest of the hill, her gaze sweeping over the shattered remnants of the crystal bazaar. Crystals lay scattered like fallen stars across the earth, their fractured surfaces catching the morning sun in a kaleidoscope of colors. The air was crisp, scented faintly with the mingling aromas of damp earth and fading magic. It was as if the market itself was exhaling after a long, held breath, releasing the tension that had gripped its hidden corners for so many nights. Beside her, Kellen's presence was steady, a quiet anchor in the stillness. He watched the horizon with a calm that belied the storms they had weathered. "It's over," he said softly, the words heavy with relief and sorrow entwined. Elara nodded, though the truth was more complicated. The bazaar's power had unraveled, its secret heart stilled, but the price they had paid lingered like a shadow. She reached up, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face, feeling the warmth of the sunlight on her skin, a warmth she had long thought lost to her. Her voice, once stolen and traded in the merciless games of the market, was hers again. Yet, the memory of silence still echoed in her mind, a reminder of the cost that freedom exacted. "Do you feel it?" Myra's voice was soft, carrying the weight of shared experience as she stepped forward. Her eyes, bright and searching, met Ilara's with a knowing look. "The magic hasn't vanished entirely. It seeps into the earth, the air, into us." Ilara glanced at the small figure of Mira, who had once been a prisoner of her own bargains in the bazaar. Now she moved with a quiet grace, her robes whispering against the grass. "It's a new beginning," Ilara said, a tentative hope threading through her words, but also a warning. "We must be vigilant." The three of them settled in a clearing nearby, arranging stones to contain a small fire. The crackling flames danced, sending flickers of light and shadow across their faces. Stories spilled out between them, tales of loss, of courage, of bargains made and broken. The fire's warmth was a balm against the chill of the past, stitching the frayed edges of their spirits with threads of connection. Even in their scars, there was strength. As the morning deepened, a subtle movement caught Ilari's eye. Near the edge of the clearing shimmered a faint silhouette, the silent entity, freed from its prison within the artifact, yet unable to fully dissolve into the world. It pulsed with an ethereal light, a silent reminder of the mysterious forces that had shaped their journey. Though it no longer bound her voice, it lingered like a whisper on the wind, a presence both haunting and strangely comforting. Ilara studied the figure, sensing the delicate balance between freedom and restraint. The entity's light flickered, as if acknowledging her gaze, before gently fading into the morning haze. It was a sign that the past was never truly gone, but a part of the path forward. With a deep breath, Ilara rose, feeling the earth solid beneath her feet. The forest path ahead was bathed in sunlight, beckoning with the promise of renewal. Kalen and Myra followed, their steps in quiet harmony with her own. The world beyond the bazaar was vast and uncertain, shaped by the echoes of magic and the choices they had made. "We carry their stories with us," Ilara said, her voice steady and clear. "The bargains, the sacrifices, they are part of who we are now, but so is our hope." As they walked into the growing light, the ruins of the Crystal Bazaar faded behind them, a chapter closed but never forgotten. The afterlight of their ordeal cast long shadows, but within those shadows burned the quiet fire of resilience, a beacon for the journeys yet to come. Yet even as hope blossomed, an unspoken question remained in Ilara's heart. What new challenges awaited beyond the horizon, born from the magic they had unleashed and the bargains they had broken? The future was unwritten, a path both daunting and full of possibility. And with that thought, Ilara stepped forward, ready to face whatever dawn awaited. The first light of dawn crept slowly over the horizon, casting a gentle glow across the valley that stretched beneath Alara's feet. She stood silently atop the hill, the cool morning air brushing softly against her skin, carrying the scent of damp earth and blooming wildflowers. The remnants of the Crystal Bazaar, once a place of shifting shadows and merciless bargains, had dissolved like mist, leaving only faint shards of crystal scattered among the grass, glimmering briefly before vanishing entirely. In the warmth of the sun, Alara's breath caught at the sight. For so long, the bazaar had been a realm of darkness, a hidden market where desperate souls bartered away parts of themselves in pursuit of impossible desires. But now, with its magic unraveling and its mercurial presence fading, a fragile peace had settled over the land. Beside her, Kalin's quiet footsteps approached, his eyes reflecting the soft hues of the breaking dawn. "It's hard to believe it's truly over," he said, voice low but steady. "The bazaar's influence was like a shadow upon the world, but the light pushes through." Alara nodded, her gaze never leaving the valley below where small clusters of people stirred to life. "We have a chance now," she replied, her voice strong and clear, resonating with the voice she had fought so hard to reclaim, to rebuild, to heal, to make sure no one ever falls prey to such darkness again. Myra joined them, her auburn curls catching the sunlight as she smiled warmly. "There are survivors down there," she said, pointing toward the village nestled near the river. "People who were touched by the bazaar's magic, changed by it. Some lost much, but many are ready to start anew." Alara's heart swelled with a mix of hope and responsibility. "We must help them," she said firmly, "not just to recover what was lost, but to guard against future dangers. The bazaar may be gone, but its echoes linger." The three of them began their descent, the soft crunch of grass beneath their feet blending with the distant sounds of life, awakening birds singing, children laughing, and the gentle murmur of voices. As they entered the village, they were met with cautious smiles and curious eyes. Survivors who once wandered, lost in silence, now greeted Alara with nods and gestures, their expressions brightening in recognition. In the village square, a small gathering had formed. Elders shared stories of survival, their voices weaving tales of courage and loss. Young ones played among the blossoming flowers, their laughter a balm to wounded hearts. Alara felt a profound warmth spread through her chest, the sense of community and renewal tangible in the air. Kaylin approached a group of villagers, discussing plans to teach them how to safeguard themselves from residual magic. "Knowledge is our strongest shield," he explained patiently. "Understanding the forces we face helps prevent them from taking hold again." Myra, meanwhile, tended to the wounded and shared relics that could aid healing artifacts once traded in the bazaar, now repurposed for restoration rather than ruin. "These are gifts," she said softly, "symbols that even in the darkest places, light can be found." As the sun climbed higher, bathing the valley in its golden warmth, Alara found a quiet moment to look skyward. The last faint glimmer of the crystal entity, the ethereal force that had once been bound within the bazaar, shimmered briefly before dissolving entirely into the blue expanse above. A soft pulse of magic lingered, silent promise that though the market had ended, vigilance would endure. Alara breathed deeply, feeling the weight of her journey settle into a steady resolve. "This is only the beginning," she whispered. "The dawn of a new day where hope and courage will shape what comes next." But even as light bathed the land, the questions remained. How would they protect this fragile peace? What unseen forces still stirred beyond the horizon? Alara knew the road ahead would be long and uncertain, yet for the first time, she welcomed it with open heart and unwavering voice. The Crystal Bazaar was no more, but its lessons were etched deep within her soul. And with the dawn, a new promise was born, a promise to safeguard the future, to stand as a beacon for those lost in darkness, and to face whatever challenges the unfolding world might bring. As the village stirred fully awake, and the sun's rays warmed the earth, Alara turned toward her companions. "Let us begin," she said, her voice steady and bright. "Together." And with that, the new dawn blossomed not just in the sky, but within the hearts of all who dared to hope. The morning air was filled with the gentle murmur of rebuilding. Villagers worked alongside Alara and her friends, clearing debris and planting seeds that promised future harvests. The scars left by the bazaar's dark influence still marked the land, but each act of care began to heal those wounds. Kalen stood nearby, overseeing the distribution of protective charms fashioned from the remnants of the bazaar's magic. "These will not restore what was lost," he said quietly, "but they will guard against its return." Myra, ever practical, organized a network of messengers to carry news of the bazaar's fall and the safety measures now in place. "Information is power," she reminded those gathered, "and together we can ensure no one else is trapped in the market's web." Alara watched their efforts with a heart full of gratitude and determination. Her own journey from voiceless wanderer to guardian of Balance had been fraught with peril and sacrifice. But now her purpose was clear. She would be a voice for the silenced, a shield for the vulnerable, and a beacon of hope in a world forever changed. The sun climbed higher still, casting long shadows that slowly receded as light filled every corner. The new dawn was not merely a moment of daybreak, but a symbol, a testament to resilience and the enduring power of choice. Alara took a deep breath, savoring the promise of this new beginning. The past was a tapestry of lessons, the present a landscape of possibilities, and the future a horizon yet to be shaped by those brave enough to rise with the dawn. And so, standing beneath a sky painted with the soft colors of morning, Alara stepped forward into the unfolding day, ready to face whatever awaited with voice, heart, and steadfast hope. As the chapter closes, the world stirs with the quiet energy of renewal, and Alara's journey continues, no longer defined by silence or loss, but by the light she carries into the new dawn. The world had shifted in the wake of the Crystal Bazaar's disappearance, but magic, she realized, never truly vanished. It lingered, like a whispered secret carried on the wind, waiting patiently to be heard. Alara stood at the edge of a rugged cliff, the cool night air brushing against her skin, carrying faint hints of the bazaar's crystalline glow that still flickered in the shadows below. The valley stretched out before her, silent and still, yet alive with a subtle pulse that quickened her heartbeat. She knelt, brushing her fingers against the rough stone beneath her. The faint shimmer of residual magic tickled her senses, a delicate, almost imperceptible hum that threaded through the world like a silver thread woven into fabric. It was not the overt, dazzling enchantment of the bazaar itself, but a softer echo, a remnant that refused to fade. As she descended toward the valley floor, the air grew thick with latent energy. Somewhere nearby, the faint rustle of leaves whispered ancient melodies, and the scent of wildflowers mingled with the lingering temps of arcane power. The bazaar, though vanished from sight, had left behind fragments of its echoes that rippled outward, touching lives and places in ways she was only beginning to understand. In a nearby village nestled between rolling hills, Alara found Myra, a young apprentice mage whose bright eyes sparkled with the thrill of discovery. Myra greeted her with a shy smile, hands glowing softly with a shimmering light that danced like fireflies in the dusk. "The magic is waking," Mira said, her voice filled with urgency yet tempered by awe. I feel it in the air, in the stones, even in the river that runs through town. It's subtle, but it's there live. Elara watched as Mira traced delicate patterns of light through the air, each movement weaving threads of energy that seemed to pulse with the bazaar's distant heartbeat. It's as if the market's spirit never truly left, Elara mused. But why now? And what does it want? Myra's gaze darkened slightly. Some say the bazaar's magic has a will of its own. It's not just a place, but a living force, responding to those who seek it. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden chill that swept through the village square. A whisper carried on the wind that seemed to carry voices from beyond. Elara's skin prickled as a translucent figure materialized before them. The whispering spirit flickered like smoke and light, its form shifting with the breeze. Traveler, it murmured, its voice a haunting melody like wind chimes stirred by a restless breeze. The bargains made and broken bind the threads of fate. The bazaar's end is but a new beginning. Beware the shifting tides. The echoes carry both hope and peril. Elara stepped forward, her eyes narrowing in concentration. What do you want from me? The spirit's form shimmered, then solidified momentarily into a visage that was both beautiful and unsettling. To protect the fragile balance, to guide those who dare listen. The legacy of the bazaar endures in those who remember their voices, their choices, their sacrifices. With a flicker, the spirit vanished, leaving behind a lingering sense of both warning and invitation. Elara felt the weight of its words settle deep within her. The Crystal Bazaar's magic was not gone, it was evolving, entwined with the world in ways she had yet to grasp. Over the following days, Elara and Myra journeyed together, seeking traces of the bazaar's influence woven through the landscape. They found glowing runes etched into ancient relics, whispers of spells carried on the wind, and moments where time seemed to shimmer with forgotten power. Each discovery deepened their bond and sharpened their resolve. One evening, beneath the canopy of stars, Elara traced her fingers along a relic carved with delicate patterns that pulsed faintly beneath her touch. The magic thrummed like a heartbeat, steady and insistent. The bazaar's promise, she whispered. It's not just about bargains or power. It's about the choices we make, the voices we raise, and the futures we shape. Myra nodded, her eyes reflecting the glow. And perhaps it's calling us to new adventures, new challenges that we cannot yet see. Elara looked out over the horizon, the first hints of dawn painting the sky in soft hues. The echoes of magic stirred within her, a reminder that her journey was far from over. The Crystal Bazaar had vanished beneath the moonlight, but its legacy would live anew. The voices united, the bargains broken and remade, and the endless dance of magic and fate. As the sun rose, Elara felt a quiet determination settle over her. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it with the strength of those who had come before and the hope of those yet to come. The echoes of magic were a call to arms, a promise of renewal, and a whisper of the infinite possibilities waiting just beyond the horizon. And somewhere, deep within the shifting currents of the world, the Crystal Bazaar's spirit waited patiently for the next traveler brave enough to listen. The night had passed, but the story was far from finished. Elara's voice, once lost and now reclaimed, sang a new song, one that would resonate with the magic of the ages and the promise of tomorrow. This is only the beginning, she thought, as the dawn painted the world anew. And with that, the echoes of magic carried her forward, into the mysteries that awaited beyond the fading shadows of the Crystal Bazaar. The moon hung low and waning, its silver light softening the edges of the world, as the last tendrils of the crystal bazaar faded into the night. Ilara stood at the threshold, where the labyrinthine market once thrived, a place of shifting bargains, and whispered, secrets now dissolving like mist at dawn. The air was cool, tinged with the scent of damp earth and distant rain, and the silence around her was profound, broken only by the gentle rustle of leaves, stirred by a breeze that carried with it the faintest echo of voices long lost. For a moment, Ilara closed her eyes, feeling the pulse of the artifact cradled in her palms, light dim but steady, a heartbeat tethered to hers. The curse that had stolen her voice, silencing her for so long, now unraveled within her, threads of magic unwinding with a quiet intensity. She took a breath, deep and steady, and opened her mouth. Her voice returned like a rushing tide, clear, vibrant, and alive. The sound startled her at first, the sensation of speaking words again washing over her with a rush of emotion, too complex to name. "I am here," she whispered, then louder, "I am free." Kalen stepped forward from the shadows, a smile breaking across his face. His eyes, reflecting the flicker of the campfire they had built on the outskirts of the bazaar's former boundary, shone with pride and relief. "You found your voice," he said quietly, his tone laced with a mix of admiration and hope. Ilara nodded, her gaze steady, and with it a purpose. The journey had been arduous, twisting through illusions, confronting fears, and bargaining with forces older than the moon itself. She had lost much, but the voice she reclaimed was not merely her own, it was a beacon for others trapped in silence and shadows, a promise that the darkness of the bazaar need not define their fates. As the fire crackled between them, Kalen spoke of the travelers they had met, those still ensnared by the bazaar's lingering magic. "There are others who need us," he said. "The market's echoes reach beyond its walls." Ilara's heart tightened, the weight of responsibility settling upon her shoulders. Then we must be their voice. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft shimmer of light. From the fading crystal shards that once formed the bazaar's core, Syra emerged, her form radiant and shifting like the starlit sky. Her eyes held a depth of wisdom and sorrow, a reminder that magic, though fading here, would forever ripple outward. "The bazaar's end is but a beginning," Syra intoned, her voice like the chiming of distant bells. "Its legacy will persist in the hearts of those who dare to remember. Guard your voice well, Ilara, for it carries the power to heal and to warn." Ilara stepped forward, meeting Silra's gaze with calm determination. "I will not let its lessons fade into silence." As Silra's light wove around her like a cloak, the silent spirit, the entity once bound within Ilara's artifact, manifested in a final ethereal dance. Its presence was delicate, a wisp of shadow and light, its voice a gentle murmur that stirred the leaves and brushed against Ilara's skin like a sigh. "Thank you," the spirit breathed, dissolving into the night air. "Keep the promise." The moment was bittersweet. Freedom had come at great cost, but the bonds forged through hardship were unbreakable. Ilara felt the spark of something new, hope fused with resolves. She turned to Kalen and the path ahead. "We have work to do," she said, voice steady and sure. "The world beyond the bazaar awaits." Together, they stepped forward into the dawn, carrying not just the echoes of the crystal bazaar, but the strength to shape what would come next. The traveler's voice was no longer lost, it was a beacon, a promise whispered beneath the stars and carried on the wind, that even in silence, hope could be founded with voice, it could be shared. And as the first light of morning painted the horizon, Ilara knew that her journey was far from over. The night was darker than any Alara had known since her first steps into the Crystal Bazaar. Above her, the new moon hung invisible, a void against the endless stretch of ink-black sky. The market, once a dazzling labyrinth of shimmering stalls and whispered deals, now lay silent, its magic fraying at the edges like an old tapestry unraveling thread by thread. The air hummed faintly with the remnants of enchantments, but the restless energy that had once pulsed through every corner had ebbed away, leaving a hush that felt almost sacred. Alara stood at the heart of this fading wonder, her breath catching in the cold night air. The relic she had carried for so long now rested lightly on her wrist, its glow subdued but steady, like a heartbeat echoing in the quiet. Her eyes traced the outlines of the stalls that shimmered faintly before dissolving into mist mirrors that had shown her deepest fears. Tapestries woven with fate's threads, and merchants cloaked in shadows who had once tempted her with impossible bargains. She remembered every step of her journey, the desperate trade of her voice, the silent bargains, the alliances forged in whispers and silence, the echoes of those lost to the market's insatiable hunger. Each memory pressed against her mind like a weight, but not one of regret. Instead, it filled her with a resolute purpose that had grown stronger with every trial. A sudden ripple disturbed the stillness. From the shifting shadows at the edge of the clearing, the merchant emerged once more, cloaked in darkness that seemed woven from the very fabric of the bazaar itself. Their face remained half hidden beneath a hood, but their eyes glistened with an unsettling light, like shards of crystal catching moonlight, even in its absence. "You have done well," the merchant's voice was a low murmur, blending with the night's whispers. "But remember, every promise carries weight. The bargains are never truly over." Alara met the gaze steadily, the silence between them thick with unspoken truths. The merchant's form flickered, as though caught between worlds, then slowly dissolved into the night, leaving behind a faint scent of ozone and frost. From the shadows stepped Leora, her auburn hair catching the faint starlight that had begun to pierce the darkness. Around her gathered the silent chorus, those who had reclaimed their voices and those still bound by the market's lingering magic. Their faces were etched with the marks of their past bargains, yet their eyes shone with newfound hope. Together, they raised their voices, not in words, but in a harmonized chant that wove through the air like a delicate thread of light. The spell they cast was soft but unyielding, wrapping the fading bazaar in a protective embrace. It was a song of unity, of resistance, and of renewal, a promise that the darkness would not claim others as it had claimed so many before. Alara closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of their magic mingle with the steady pulse of the relic on her wrist. With deliberate movements, she traced a symbol in the air, a sigil of protection and remembrance. Though her voice had been reclaimed, she chose silence in that moment, letting the vow resonate quietly within her soul. "I will protect them," she vowed silently. "I will guard the lessons of the Crystal Bazaar so that no one else suffers its price." The first stars blinked awake overhead, scattering pinpricks of light across the velvet sky. The market shimmered one last time before dissolving entirely, leaving behind nothing but the soft rustle of leaves and the gentle hum of residual magic in the earth beneath her feet. As dawn approached, Alara felt the weight of her promise settle within her, a burden, yes, but also a beacon. The Crystal Bazaar was no longer just a place of lost voices and shifting bargains. It had become a testament to resilience, to the power of choice, and to the silent strength found in those who dared to reclaim what was taken. The path ahead was uncertain, shadowed by the possibility of the bazaar's return or the rise of new dangers born from its remnants. But Alara was ready. With allies by her side and a vow etched in silence, she stepped forward into the night's embrace. a guardian of the fragile balance between desire and consequence. And beneath the new moon, unseen but ever watchful, the echoes of the crystal bazaar whispered their final promise, that even in darkness, hope could be born anew. The promise made beneath the new moon was not just a personal pledge. It was a turning point. Alara's journey had transformed her from a desperate traveler into a sentinel, one who understood the weight of forbidden commerce and the shifting nature of bargains made in shadow. The lessons of the bazaar would endure through her vigilance, carried forward in stories whispered to those who might one day find themselves at a crossroads. Her silence was no longer a void, but a shield, a reminder that some promises are spoken not with words, but with the steadfastness of the heart. As the world beyond the fading market stirred awake, Ilara's figure merged with the coming dawn, a silent guardian ready to face whatever new challenges awaited. The crystal bazaar might have ended, but its legacy was far from over.